Okay, I'm gonna try not to cough and ruin your recording.
Okay, but if you feel like you need to say something, try your hardest.
I don't want to talk.
All right. All right, the first thing we're talking about is script analysis, objectives, and super objectives. You already ruined what you tried.
I'm sorry.
The first that we're looking at is letter I in the syllabus. It's from the maydays.co.uk. All right, so an objective is an action-oriented goal that a character wants to achieve. The objective doesn't have to be achieved by the character, and it can be as complex or simple as the script permits. It's the answer to the question, what do I want for the character in any given moment? It can be as simple as to pour a cup of coffee. Super objectives focus on the film or show as a whole. A super objective can direct and connect an actor's choice of objectives from scene to scene. That's the question of where do I want to be in blank amount of years? It's a common super objective that we set for ourselves. What do the characters want to achieve by the end of the script, by the end of the story? What is their main goal? With objectives, there can come obstacles. For instance, the character's objective in the moment may be to pour a cup of coffee, but when they open the cupboard, all the cups are gone or dirty, or maybe they find there's no more coffee left. This creates an obstacle in the way of the character's objective to pour that cup of coffee. Objectives can change in a scene, especially when obstacles get in the way. So the character may see there's no coffee and have a new objective to have another kind of drink. Or they may hold on to their original objective and overcome the obstacles in order to achieve the original objective. So they may go to the store, buy more coffee. They may clean the cups. They may find where the cups went in order to be able to achieve that original objective of something as simple as pouring a cup of coffee. Or they might, go ask a neighbor if they have any coffee left so that they can use theirs. A super objective rarely changes and usually only changes if the character has an epiphany or a complete change of heart. The thing they want most in the world doesn't easily change. So it has to be something that it's a big moment in stories when that happens, when they, in character development, character arc, when they realize something they thought they wanted most isn't what they wanted and they change what they want most.
Like a Christmas movie.
Like a Christmas movie. And sometimes it doesn't happen until the end. In TV shows, it can happen anywhere in the show, but it usually tends to happen either near the end or somewhere near the beginning so that we can see this new change play out. Sometimes it'll happen in the middle, but it does sort of change the story and the way it goes because now what the character wants, their main objective overall for the whole show is different. So now the show is going to feel different. And that's why many stick to changing it near the end or near the beginning. Same thing with films. They don't usually change the main objective of the character until the end when they have a revelation of something, or near the beginning so we can see that change play out until the end of the film. In the middle of the film, again, it's going to change the way the rest of the film feels most of the time because what the character was going for is now going to be different every scene. They're going to do little things that add up to trying to achieve that super objective.
I Ernest, feel like you need to give them reason enough to want. They probably can't hear me from here, but
Nah, I don't think so.
I think the thing that you need to focus on is giving them reason enough, justification enough to change those major wants and desires, wants and needs and stuff. Because you need to make sure that it's pointed out in the script, written well and developed well, so that it doesn't seem like a complete 180.
Yeah. This next stuff comes from ernestgoodmanstudios.com, and they put it like this. If you're trying to raise funding for your film, that may be your super objective. Even though your current objective is to go get lunch, it's still so that you can continue toward your goals of achieving your super objective. It's very rare that an objective, like a small objective, is going to be an adverse or an obstacle to their super objective. It may not be completely related, like going to get lunch and funding a film, but it doesn't play against it. It's you're eating so you can survive to live another day to try to get your funding for your film. So you're still trying to achieve your super objective. You just have a smaller objective in that moment. And that is the same thing with scripts and stories. They have moment-to-moment objectives, they have scene objectives, and then they also have their super objective overall. So with that, what am I trying to say? With that example, if you go to a restaurant to eat, your super objective hasn't left and is still in the back of your mind. You're still trying to get funding for your film. If you see a film investor at lunch, you might give up your current objective, skip lunch in order to try to further achieve the super objective of funding your film. Even if you don't see a film investor, having the objective of eating doesn't work against your super objective of funding your film eventually. So if a character's current objective works against their super objective, you either have the wrong super objective for the character, like you thought they wanted something, but you might be mistaken, so you might want to double check, or that moment or scene doesn't fit the character or story, because why would they be doing something to go against what they want overall? Unless there are moments that this does happen in a well-written script, sometimes they are self-sabotaging themselves. Something they want overall, but they're kind of scared to try to achieve it. So they actually work against it in the moment when all they really want is to successfully launch their business, but they don't end up going to the pitch meeting that they had set up, and they do something else that's unrelated. And it seems like they're going against their super objective of getting their business launched. But in reality, it's because they're scared and they're worried that if that pitch meeting doesn't go well, that they're never going to get off the ground. So they'd rather keep it as a mystery of maybe I can get this started later. And typically that doesn't stick. It doesn't keep happening over and over in the script. Eventually they get over that and they go and try to achieve their super objective, whether they're scared or not.
Everything in a script needs to be going towards something. There needs to be a purpose for that storyline. So if you are going, oh, he's going to self-sabotage himself at one point, it needs to either lead up to the realization or like move the story along. Like it can't just be like, oh, look at him messing up a million times, just because it will bring the story to a halt. That's something that a lot of people complain about.
Right. So when you're doing script analysis, you always want to double check if they're ever working, if there's ever a moment they're working against their overall objective. You either don't have the right super objective in mind. You thought that they wanted the business to launch, but really what they want is to not have to work ever again. So they're kind of lazy.
Even if people do that in real life, we always have to remember, like, it's film. We're telling a story, and the story needs to have a structure, beginning, middle, and end, and it needs to flow together.
Yeah, so when you're doing script analysis, you should find those elements, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and it should all fit. And so when you're looking for a character's super objective, when you're looking for the main thing that they want in the script, in their life, if it extends beyond the script, just make sure that you double check if they're ever working against it. Make sure you have the right thing in mind. Make sure it makes sense to why they might be doing this. Does it fit their character? Or maybe this scene or this moment should be taken out of the script or changed because it just doesn't match and it makes the character not seem like how they do the rest of the script. You don't want that either. You don't want any scene or any moment to feel like this character is now a new person, because you only have, in a film, you only have 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 1.5 hours to get people to know that character. And a TV show, it's a bit better because, you have a lot longer to get them developed and get people to be interested in this character.
But even in TV
shows, you don't want to have an episode or part of an episode where that character just doesn't feel like themselves and there's no reason for it. You want to have a purpose for them to to act differently. You know, their mom just died, and that's why they're acting so mean this episode, when really they're a bubbly, nice person usually. That kind of stuff. Like, you don't want to have them be different for no reason. So doing script analysis, you find their super objective, and then you look through and you find their small objectives. Do they lead to it? Do they play against it? Does it make sense? Does it match the character? And you find all the objectives that they're doing in each moment, in each scene, and what they want overall. And make sure to keep track of all of that stuff.
Never can do anything with my life.
I'm not sure.
So that's
Did you say something? Okay. Super objectives aren't as easy to figure out, since they are rooted deep in the character's soul and are often not as visible as moment and scene objectives. Like I said, to pour a cup of coffee, that's easy to figure out. It's pretty obvious what they're trying to do. If you see a character move over to a cup or a coffee, what do you call it? Coffee machine, I guess. And then you just pour it into a glass. Obviously, they wanted to pour that cup of coffee for themselves. However, figuring out their super objective might be a bit harder, because that's their overall goal. Coffee machine, I said.
It's coffee maker. Don't call it a coffee machine.
You can call it a coffee machine. What are you talking about? Characters
People
may
who are
question
normal
their
and
overall
coffee
goal.
don't
Characters may question their overall goal, especially when it starts to get tough. Do I even want this anymore? Do I really want to start this business? You know, standoutbooks.com says that a character may not even know their super objective. This makes sense because not everybody knows exactly what they want. So their super objective may be to complete college and get a nice job somewhere and have a family. But in the moment, they might not know what they want in life, or that they want that at all. They might not know that they want to go to college. They might not know that's what they want exactly. And they might be struggling to figure that out.
It might be clear to the viewer, though, or to the people around them.
No, because even if you're doing script analysis, sometimes it's not as easy to figure out. So in those instances, during script analysis, it's up to you to ultimately discover what the super objective is, whether the character knows it or not. So the character may not know it the entire way through, but you should be able to find it. The script should be able to point to something that shows the character doing things that kind of leads to the way of what their super objective is. Objectives are the wants. I want to pour a cup of coffee. I want this, I want that. They're the moment to moment things that the character wants. Super objectives are the need, or what the character believes is what they need. So it's the thing that they need most, or it's the thing they think they need most. I need fame, I need fortune, I need to be having a good job. Or it actually is the thing that they need, and they might not be aware of what it is. And that's when you find it in script analysis. The goals, motivation, and etc. are the objectives. And the overall arc goal, the life goal, is the super objective. When a character's objective changes in a moment, you can use that to break the scene into bits or units, which we'll talk about later this semester. And that's a good way to be able to direct the actors, and for an actor to look into their character and see what they want. Because when an objective changes, and when it's something as simple as pouring coffee, what's the next thing they do? Obviously, that usually is not going to be the whole scene. So what's the next thing that they do in that scene, in that moment? What's the next moment? And then you can break it into moments, and breaking it into moments can help you really figure out what this character is doing and at any given point, which can also help when analyzing everything they do over the course of the whole script, can help you figure out what their super objective has been the whole time. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about objectives or super objectives? All right. So yeah, that's the next thing you find after given circumstances. You figure out what is this character's main goal and what do they want in each moment. And then you go through and do it again. If there's secondary characters, antagonists, however many characters there are, you do it for each one. Each character should have their own super objective. and moment-to-moment objectives.
If it gets too bad, I might go in the living. I mean,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So now you mentioned the antagonist. Now, can you write like two characters at the same time? You know, the protagonist and antagonist character arcs at the same time.
When you're writing,
Yeah, like to really find the objective.
so when you're writing, yeah, you should definitely do that. When you're doing script analysis, I would say take it character by character just to make sure that you have
Okay.
it. Because if you're reading both of them at the same time, they might not appear in all the same scenes. And even if they do, you don't want to be trying to think about what each of them want at the same time. You want to look at it from one
Yeah.
character's point of view and then go back and look at it from the other character's point of view.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, when you're
Yeah, that
writing
makes
it,
sense.
you should some of this stuff as you're writing, you kind of need to think about, or before you write it, you should probably think about this because this goes with the character arcs. What's going to happen in act 1, 2, 3, what are these characters going to do? And having an antagonist with a different set of goals, a different super objective compared to the protagonist with different sets of goals and super objectives. That's what causes that conflict to happen whenever the characters meet, because they're both trying to get different things. They may be the opposite, and that's going to have them clash. That's usually why they're an antagonist to the protagonist, because they want something opposite or they want something different than the character wants.
Right. Okay.
I hope that helps.
Mhm.
I hope that
Yeah,
helps.
Yeah, no, you answered my question.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
All right, next thing we're talking about is premieres, a film premiere. This stuff comes from Cast Studios. It's letter A in the syllabus. It's how to plan a premiere party, episode 10, create a web series. Hosting a premiere or a premiere party is to showcase your film, show, or web series for the first time to the public. You can host a premiere at different locations, but common ones are, of course, at movie theaters, hotel conference rooms. You can also do them at restaurants or somewhere that may not have large screens, especially if you bring a projector and a screen. So for smaller film, you might be able to like rent out a restaurant or something, and then a smaller restaurant, put up a big screen somewhere on the wall. Great. You're giving me cough.
Sometimes if the movie is a specific theme, they might go with like a gimmick of, if it's a movie about a zoo, they might maybe try to talk to a zoo about getting a premiere there.
Mhm.
Or
You could definitely, you could apply it to your actual film and get a location that matches the film itself, because that'd be kind of cool.
yeah, it'd be really interesting and fun. People could make a day of it too. Instead of just going like, yeah, movie premiere is already awesome, but like there's an added bonus to it. You're going to movie premiere at a specific location that's different and unique.
If you filmed it locally, you might be able to get one of the locations you used to allow you to host your premiere. And that's also a cool thing, because then people can watch the film and then they can feel like they're sort of in the film as they're watching it. There's also the option of hosting one at your house or even doing an online only premiere.
But they somewhat recommend against that because, you know, safety reasons. Unless it's people that you know and you vetted. Something like that.
I mean, the same thing as having a party at your house.
No,
It's just
yeah, but
for your
that's
film.
why, you know, it's an added thing they have to consider. is what
Yeah.
they say. Another thing is like some people will rent out a space, like a house or whatever. For example, I don't know where I heard it, but there's this murder mystery independent film, and they rented out like this castle-looking manor thing, and they actually had the premiere there.
Like an Airbnb, but you have to make sure that the Airbnb knows how many people you're bringing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
but
cool.
and they had the premiere there, and that was like really cool because it's like, oh, this murder mystery at this manor. We're having the premiere at the manor.
Yeah. And so that could be, it could be a themed party, or it can just be the theme being your premiere itself. So you can definitely choose that stuff and make it more unique or make it more generic based on what you want.
That way, even if people don't necessarily like love the movie, the fact that the premiere was so unique will give them a better memory of it in their minds, and they might be willing to revisit it later,
Yeah.
or at least speak better of it. Like, oh, it was a small film, it was an independent film, so of course it wasn't like big blockbuster, but they were so unique. They gave us a premiere at this place, and they made it feel immersive and cool, you know.
Not to mention making it immersive and different like that can also get people to share it on social media and share their whole experience, which just helps to market your film, spread the word about your film without you having to actually like place ads and tell them to do that, because they'll just be doing it on their own. But yeah, so there's also the option of hosting one at your house or like in your backyard or something, and then also online only premieres, which we'll get into later. The girl from Cast Studio, she chose to host at a theater, which she said was pretty expensive. So she sold tickets to offset the cost and pay for the actual premiere itself. She charged $15 for early bird tickets, $20 for regular, and gave $5 off promo codes to her cast and crew to invite other people, and did a competition with them for whoever can sell the most tickets. They'll win free ear pods to incentivize them to help sell
You
tickets.
mean AirPods?
Oh yeah. So she did a competition for her cast and crew so that they have a reason more so than just, hey, come see the movie that I'm in or the movie I helped with, so that they have a little bit more of an incentive to really try to spread the message and get as many people as possible if they really want those AirPods.
Because there's earbuds and there's AirPods. Earbuds are just so generic, whichever type.
Yeah.
Anyway.
She made some flyers and gave those out as well, as gave some to cast and crew to help hang up and give out leading up to the premiere. So something you want to think about. There's templates all online if you
That
ever
is a
want to.
cool looking flyer too. I like it.
Yeah, it's just a random template on like just from Google. So
Yeah, but
There's-
it looks fun.
yeah, exactly. It looks interesting. It catches your attention. So that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to look a little glamorous, catch your attention. It's a movie premiere, even though it's just an independent film, maybe you still want to make it feel bigger than it is.
And most people, if they don't know the movie, the fact that it's an event, the fact that, oh, it's going to be in a cool looking theater, it's good, like, let's make a day of it. Whether the movie's good or bad, it's associated with a cool date night or family night or whatever, you know?
Yeah. And people like having a cool event to do. And especially if you're going to do it locally and you might not be in a big city that has a bunch of film premieres, that could be something different that nobody around your area has ever done, giving them more of an incentive to go check it out because it's something unique, a unique date night, a unique time with the family, whatever it may be, whatever kind of film you're making will draw in certain audiences, or at least hopefully you marketed it to those certain audiences. Even your movie premiere, you have to market it a bit. But yeah, so you have flyers, you want to make flyers to give out, hang up all around town or wherever you're allowed to, as well as show it online and make sure that you try to spread the message that you have a movie premiere, you have the date, and you have the cost if you're charging tickets. You have all that information on it, so it's easy to see and easy to figure out what this thing is. She also recommends, if you can, having an event coordinator so that you can enjoy your film and premiere without being pulled away everywhere.
Worrying about every little thing.
She said the one thing she regrets is not hiring an event coordinator because she wasn't able to enjoy the day as much, because everything, obviously, you know, everything that goes wrong or anything that needs a question or what do we do with this? What are we supposed to do with that? All has to go through her. And so she keeps getting pulled away here and there to try to handle situations or handle different things, make sure that everything's running smoothly,
And even if
because
it's
it
not
is an
something-
event.
And even if it's not something urgent, if you are the person doing the sole event planning, like you don't have a separate person, you need to be on standby for those kinds of things. So you need to be attentive to everything. You need to be prepared for everything. So there is no like, okay, unless someone asks for me or unless someone needs me, I can relax. No, you need to be like constantly focused on, is everything okay? Is everyone here? Is there anyone at the door? Did we get all the tickets? Blah, blah, blah. Security, safety, blah, 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 you know?
Yeah, so there's a lot to handle, more than what you'd think, because it is an event, and whenever you're gathering people for an event, there's a lot of things that you have to think about and keep in mind and keep control over, so the event doesn't go crazy, awry, and people start doing stuff. So also, hopefully not, but if there's any fights or anything like that, if you're the event leader, you're the one that has to handle that type of stuff. So, or figure out how to handle it. Maybe you call the cops, who knows? But still, if you don't have an event coordinator or somebody that can handle those situations, no matter how small or big, then you're the one who has to do it. And so it kind of doesn't ruin the event, but it does make it less fun, less of an event for you, more work for you.
And by
But
the
it
time
is
you got
cheaper,
there,
so
you
there
just
is
wanna-
the option, there is the choice of that. Do I want it cheaper, as cheap as I can get it? Because I don't care if it's more work. I just want people to enjoy my film, and I want people to come and see it, rather than I want to enjoy this premiere myself. So there is that too. It's a choice that you have to make. Another
Sometimes it's
thing
not
that-
even a choice, you just have to do it, because, budget.
Yeah, true. Sometimes it's not even a choice. You just have to do it because of budget, like Priscilla said. So if you do have to do that, just try to enjoy it as best you can, is what I would say. If you have to be the event coordinator yourself.
And
But
try
she
to
still
get as
she still
much-
had fun, even though she was the event coordinator. She still had fun. She just wished that she had somebody there to handle those things, because it did draw away her attention a bit. It doesn't mean she didn't enjoy it. She also recommends having a pamphlet of some sort to hand out at the actual event. So the flyers are for before the event. They're for people to gain attention that there's an event that's going to happen at a future date and what the cost of it will be. The pamphlet is to hand out at the actual event that has some details about the film, the main filmmakers that were involved, or the production company, the credits, and any other relevant data or info that you feel like putting in there. It doesn't have to be as extensive as like a pitch deck, but it can have, a bit about who you guys are, what kind of projects you've done, how you made it, what inspired you to make this idea, what the film is about, who the characters are, just a little information to give a little bit of a backstory or a little bit of context to what this is going to be when they go watch the actual film, or who made it. And that way they can understand what your company is, or what you as a filmmaker are trying to achieve.
And also, like,
You can
hey,
also
like this
put
film?
some calls to action, like if you want to follow us, here's like, if you have a newsletter, you can invite them to join that. You can invite them to go to your website and subscribe to something or whatever, buy some merch here and there. You can definitely put some of that type of stuff in the pamphlet itself, so that if people are interested in supporting you further, there's information in there that can help them do that.
And also if they like the film, because let's say they like the film, but you don't have any pamphlet with your information, where to follow them, where to support them if you want to, like, then you just wasted an opportunity, because you had all those people in the room, a lot of them enjoyed your film, and now they have nowhere to go after this to continue supporting you or to find out more about it.
Yeah. So
They
you
have to do the
can,
research on their
doing
own.
stuff like this can help you create fans, a fan base that continues to follow your work after this project, because hopefully you have more in the future
And
if you
don't
enjoyed making this
expect-
one.
And don't expect to just be like, oh, we'll say the name in the beginning and they'll write it if they're interested, or we'll say it at the end. Because a lot of people, they don't want to have to do that much work. They want, like, okay, you're interested in me supporting you. Yeah, you're cool and I want to give you a follow or whatever, but I don't want to have to look you up and look for the right name. Oh, is this the right one? I don't know. Like, the more information, the more that you can do it for them, the more information you can give them. Like, here's a pamphlet with all the information you need. Boom. So they don't have to memorize it. They don't have to, they have to do as little as possible. Just follow you. That's great.
Another thing is people, they might be wanting to support you, but forget in the moment because they're enjoying the premiere event itself. But then if they bring home that pamphlet, they might see it on their counter a week later and be like, oh yeah, I forgot I was supposed to follow that newsletter or whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then, now they have another reason to. They got a reminder of it because it's on their counter. Obviously, some people will throw it away, but it's still good to just give out so that people have something that they can reference to about you, your work, your film, your crew, and like your production company. This next stuff comes from chrisjonesblog.com. It's letter B in the syllabus. If you make it a big event, you can use photos and clips from the event for marketing and promotion on websites, blogs, social media, and etc. So you can actually use the photos of themselves to help kind of market your event even further. Remember that for the larger festivals, they usually want world premiere rights. So if you're aiming to go that route, if you're aiming to go to one of the big festivals, don't hold your own premiere until after the festival or after you get a rejection from that festival that you were trying to get into. Because if you do a premiere and you're trying to get into Sundance, for instance, Sundance, even if they were going to take you, once they find out you did a premiere, they're not going to take you anymore because they require world premiere rights. So it can't have premiered anywhere else. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If you're trying to go that route, don't hold your own premiere until after the festival's over. Then you can hold a premiere maybe. It's like a second premiere or whatever you call it. I don't really know what it's called, but a premiere in that city, for instance, instead of like, or a theater premiere if you're doing theater run, instead of it just being at the festival. If you're making it a big event, don't be afraid to charge for tickets. You want to try to earn your money back or at least make back the cost of holding the premiere itself. If you're doing it in a theater, you can choose to what's called four-wall it, or you can do split revenue most of the time. Four-wall for a theater means that you're paying to rent out the space or a screen, and you're keeping all of the ticket revenue. So basically you rent out the room where the movie theater screen is, and then you charge the tickets, you handle all that, and you keep all the money from the tickets that you've sold. Split revenue means any tickets sold are split between you and the theater, but you don't pay to rent out the space. The theater helps set it up, theater helps hold the event, and then they keep a certain amount of the ticket revenue.
More often than not, theaters will want the first option because
For independent films especially, yeah.
yeah, because they don't know how much you're actually going to make, how much the tickets are actually going to sell, so they would prefer a guaranteed price. Okay, you're paying us this much.
Yeah, so
just
for
security.
Yeah, exactly like Priscilla's saying, for independent films especially, they usually want you to rent out the space and keep whatever ticket revenue you bring in, because they're not sure how much of a following you have. They're not sure how many audience members are going to come and pay tickets. And so they don't want to put effort and their own money into your event if they're not sure if you're going to get people to come. Some theaters will agree with you if you can show them past work, for instance, or past references where you've made a big opening night of a certain project, or if you have an online presence of some sort with a fan base and a following, you'll have more leverage in being able to do the other option. But it also comes down to what you think you want, because you might actually make more money renting out the space and then keeping all the revenue from the tickets if you do have a following and you know that people are going to show up. So it's ultimately up to you to decide how much risk you want to take and what you want to try to bargain for with the theater itself. Premieres are typically important to start the box office weekend. Good numbers means better chances to be able to keep it going. For small independent films, one of the distribution methods, especially self-distribution, when you're doing self-distribution, is to go from city to city, premiering it one over the other and keeping the news about it local. We talked about this before last semester when we were talking about distribution, but doing that, you want the premiere in that city, in that region, however large you're going, whatever the radius may be, to be big. That way the local news is happy to talk about it. More people are interested in seeing it because a lot more people have seen it around the area and they're like talking about it, recommending it. And it just makes the box office weekend look vastly better. If you have a bad premiere,
It's
if you
easier
have,
to get the word around.
yeah, if you have a bad premiere with a few people that showed up only, then it's going to be a lot harder to get people to come the second day, the third day, however long that, if you have an extended weekend or if you just have a 2-day weekend. So you want to try to make sure to, well, if you can, you want to have a big premiere, obviously, because it'll just help with the next days for the whole box office weekend. You want to set the date of the premiere around 3 months in advance, normally, and then start promoting it heavily. So you want to make sure that the theater agrees that you can rent it out and which screen you can rent out and how the whole thing's going to go down, all of that information. And they like to know a lot more in advance than, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be doing my film here. So 3 months is a good time to give them, like, to give you, the audience as well, people around the area, advance notice of this event is going to happen on this date 3 months from now. So the theater, so you can set it up with them, and so you can start promoting it to everybody with the flyers and things. So you have a set date and it's in advance enough where they can take off work or they can work around a schedule to get a babysitter or whatever they need to do to be able to attend that event if they want. Try to make an amazing night out and promise, market, and then deliver it. Actually give them a great night out. Don't just promise it and then have it be an awful night. Some things you should want for your premiere are a red carpet. You want to lay that out, even if it's just a small one. You want to make it feel like
People feel fancy.
they're fancy and give them a reason to take photos. They're walking down the red carpet. It feels nice. It feels cool. It feels like they're at an actual big event. No matter how small that event may actually be, you want to make it feel bigger than it is. One way you can do that is by buying or renting out a red carpet. They're not really that expensive. It might be a few $100 to have a big long one.
And for a small local premiere, most people have never been to a real premiere before. So it will feel, if you put actual effort in, it will feel special. It will feel fun. They will really enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll give them a reason to talk about it, to share it on social media and talk about it with their friends. Make it more well-known that you have a business, that you have a production company, you're a filmmaker, you do projects, you're local, and that you have made a film and this film is out. So it gives people a reason to share that information. You also want to have one of these, which is called a step and repeat banner. So people can walk up to it, they can stand in front of it, your cast, you can take pictures with people, your guests can take pictures on their own. And that way people can take pictures with you and stuff in front of your logo. They can see your branding, and maybe it's your film title with your logo and whatever else you may want up there. For larger films, they usually have ads, like they might have Verizon on here or something that is advertising with the film. So they're getting a little bit of funding from that company to sponsor this event. But for smaller independent productions that can happen, but not as often, I would say if you're trying to get local brands and local companies to help sponsor your event, try to ask small local companies.
Yeah, you might get local cafes, local restaurants and bakeries, stuff like that. Local bookstores, they tend to do a lot of those. They really enjoy it, especially in smaller towns or closer communities. They really enjoy it because it gets more people. There, you already have somewhat of a built-in audience because people that go to their place will hear about it and oh, I've never, okay, we'll go, you already come here all the time anyway. And they'll get more people to their business. So it's a win-win, You'll get
Yeah,
more
so if
people
you
to
want to
learn
try to
about it.
get sponsorship of some sort in your independent film, I would say try locally. If not, you can still have one of these and just have your logo, your film logo, and maybe another company or something that worked on the production. One that was a big help or did the most work other than your own production company.
I would just say, remember to pitch it well, not in a cocky way, I'm promoting, I'm making film and I'm giving you the pleasure of sponsoring or whatever. Be humble, but also be confident. It's a hard balance to find, but be confident in the way like, hey, I feel like this could be mutually beneficial for us. What do you think? I feel like it could be a ton of fun. Make them feel like they're also gaining something, but also don't act like you're like huge and they'd be lucky to have you and how dare they say no situation.
Right. So yeah, always be humble in those situations, especially as an independent filmmaker, but also be confident in your work and confident in your pitch whenever you're pitching different things to different people. So if you are trying to get sponsorship, like Priscilla said, confident but humble. It's really hard balance to find, but try to find it as best you can. But yeah, so and then you might also want to do like possibly drinks after. So after they watch the film premiere, everybody can go into the dining hall or dining room or wherever it may be and have drinks together and discuss, maybe have a few question and answer type things with you, or just have discussions and photos. You can do little tiny like event type things like that after your actual premiere of your film. That way, if you make it more than just your film itself, people will be more willing to come enjoy it. Premieres aren't as common as other date night activities for non-movie people. So it's something worth trying to reach them for as well, because now it's something new, something they've never done before, some cool little event, date night, or just a night out that they can do.
And even for people that are of like movie date nights, it's something different. Like, oh, we're going to an actual premiere. That's also special.
Yeah, so if you are doing a premiere, I would suggest try to go big with it when you can, or try to make it feel bigger than it is. Because obviously, if you're an independent film, you're not going to have the biggest budget. Don't blow out a huge amount of money on the event.
Yeah, be smart about it.
Be smart and strategic, but try to make it feel bigger than it is. With ticketing, if you're premiering at a theater, you can decide if you're going to use their system or your own. Using theirs, you'll get the box office information. They'll also deal with everything. And they have an existing site that may have some passing traffic, which might lead to more sales possibly. If people look at, they're going to go see a movie anyway that night, they might look at yours and be like, hey, what's this? And then you might have made another sale because they have it on their site. You may be able to get the list of emails that bought the tickets, but with the theater, it's really up to them whether they want to release that information to you or not. It's not illegal, I don't believe, for them to do it. Certain states it might be, I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's not really illegal because they already have that information and it's based on your project. So I think they're allowed to give it to you in most cases. So they might be willing to do that and give you the information of who bought tickets, what their emails are, so you can contact them, and not like independently, but just kind of a overall newslettery type message like, oh, thank you for this. If you'd like to know more, blah, 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 blah.
Be careful not to get too spammy, because otherwise it'll ruin your reputation with the film, with the theater. And also it'll annoy the people that go to that theater thinking, oh, they're giving my information to these companies and they're spamming me, and then they'll lose customers because of it too. So you really want to be careful with that.
Yeah, so if you handle ticketing your own way, you'll have access to all the emails that bought tickets, which can be useful to try to update them and build a fan base later for future projects. Again, you don't, like Priscilla said, you don't want to be too spammy with it, of course, but it's just something you want to maybe send out like, oh, we appreciate you buying a ticket. Can't wait to see you at the event. If you'd like to learn more about our upcoming projects, if you'd like to know more about our film process, if you'd like to know more about blah, 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 then you can follow us here. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can see more at our website. Whatever you want to try to get them to do, you can just send out a message like that to everyone who buys a ticket. And that way, anybody who is interested can further look into you and your work. And then you can start maybe building that fan base, building those followers, that following. You also may be able to have a simpler ticketing system than the theater might have on their own website, which could keep people going through with the purchase. Because sometimes certain sites, especially if it's just a locally owned theater and it's not set up that well online because they're used to people just coming in and buying tickets at the actual ticket box. They can have kind of older websites, or they can have like very complicated ticketing systems where you click a button and it says the quantity on there, and then you have to do the quantity before you go into the actual purchase of the ticket instead of being able to do it later in the website. Different things like that can make it a little bit more difficult to buy tickets. If anyone's ever bought tickets from a local site before, whether it's for a concert or a theater or something like that, it can be very like annoying. And sometimes if you're not really caring too much about the event, it can draw people away and be like, you know what, screw it, who cares? This is too complicated, especially depending on how tech savvy they are and how much they're willing to look into how to actually get what they want. How do I actually add 2 people in here? You know, instead of going back 3 pages and then finding it there, they just decide, you know what, never mind. Especially if it's an independent film or it's something that they were just going to kind of do on a whim. So that is something, not necessarily a end all be all if you have your ticketing system over theirs, but if you do have your own, it can usually be pretty simple. You can set it up through some kind of system, which makes it a lot easier to buy tickets.
Unless yours is the complicated one.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure yours isn't complicated. If you have a distributor, you may be able to get to agree to let you keep all the premiere revenue when striking a deal with them, depending on how many places you're premiering and other details. So that is a little more rare, but you are able to do it. But if you do keep all the revenues from the premiere, it can cover the costs of the premiere itself, your DCP mastering, your design and print of the poster and key art, and possibly more depending on how much you take in. And so if you're trying to strike a deal like that with your distributor where you say, I'm going to keep all the premiere revenue and then we split the cost from there, it's usually because you're saying that you're going to take on a lot more of the initial costs and do it yourself for certain things so that they don't have to, and they can take on less risk, less costs to be able to make their money back and then start making a profit on your project. So making that deal with them that you'll cover the cost of those things if you can keep the premiere revenue, that can be done depending on the distributor and the circumstances. Be aware that weekends are good with more people off work, but also may be difficult as you'll be going up against larger films and other activities people could do instead.
Time of year, same thing. If it's like in the summertime, it'll be more of a competition.
Yeah, exactly. It's the summertime, it's near Christmas season, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's when a lot of people have off. So
those are really good times, but there's a lot of competition.
Those are when the biggest films come out. So it might not be the best time for you to come out as a small independent project. We talked about that before as well.
It also might, because most people are looking for something to do on those off seasons. They want an excuse for a date night or for family night or whatever. So you'd have more of a, hey, this is the only thing happening this weekend, or the only thing that's happening this month or week or whatever. So a lot more people would be willing to try it because they want to do something.
Right, but
pros and cons.
Yeah, because adversely to that, it's that less people are probably available to do the event in the first place, which is why there's not other events going on that weekend or that day. So there are those pros and cons to it. We talked about that before, but it also could be, if you're going up against big films, some of the biggest blockbusters of the year, it might be that you have a film that's different than theirs, and that can actually be a good thing to premiere on those days because you try to draw in the crowd that doesn't care to go see whatever the big blockbusters are. They want to see something more personal. They want to see something more, I don't know, different feeling from whatever the biggest blockbuster is, whether that's just like an action movie coming out and they don't really care about action. And so you have a story that is more of a thriller or a horror or a drama. they might be more willing to go see your film in that same weekend. It might not really make a difference because they didn't plan to go see the other one anyway. But again, that goes with distribution, that goes with that. So premiering, you're thinking about the distribution of your film for its first night. So you really want to think about when you want to release it. If you have a distributor, they usually help you out, figure out this type of information. If you've made it where you've made a deal where you're going to keep all the premiere revenue, they may not help you out with the premiere because they don't care, because all the revenue goes to you. So they don't care how much money you make, or they might care because that sets it up for a bigger gain for them later on. It will really just depend on the distributor, how much work they want to put in and how much they feel like it's worth. Vish said, can a producer fix the ticket price of the theaters? Yes. So Vish, a producer or a production company can choose what price they want to charge tickets. If it's shared revenue, you might have to make a deal with the theater. They might have more say in it. But if it's four wall where you are renting out the space, you can charge whatever you want. That could be $5, that could be $50, that could be $100 if you feel like people are going to pay for it. But obviously look into it and kind of see what the average is. I would say I think $20 is pretty much the average for independent films right now. But I've heard that from a few different people, but I don't know, like where you are will also make a difference. If you're premiering in New York, you might need to charge more or less because you might get more people to come. So it really has to go into how many people do you think are going to come? How much does it cost to rent out in this location? And how many people would I have to bring in at this cost to break even and then make a profit on this night? You have to think about all of that. Also, some people do it just so they do cheap tickets so that they can have a big opening night, not in revenue, but in amount of people that showed up so that the word of mouth spreads. So that goes in with marketing, it goes in with distribution and kind of figuring out what route you want to take to try to get the most money in the long run. He said, would AMC do something like that for regular release? So I have heard that chained theaters are a lot harder to get in with than locally owned theaters or smaller chains, because the big chains, they have exclusive deals with like the big companies. And the way it works is Disney actually rents out certain screens, or Universal rents out certain screens for their film. And whether that film is showing at that time or not, nothing else can show in that screen unless Universal gives the approval or Disney gives the approval or whoever's renting out the screen. So you might be able to get AMC to show your film, to be willing to anyway, but you'd have to do it on a screen that's not being used, which is less likely because usually all those screens are being used by some company or another. And if a company is renting out those screens, you have to get them to agree to let you show your film at a time that they're not trying to show their own. And so it gets a little more complicated. Brian said, not after COVID, theaters are desperate now. Okay, so I mean, then it might have changed the landscape.
It depends on their contracts, because some companies unfortunately are stuck in certain contracts. But yeah, now because of COVID, there's less movies right now. They need more money. A lot more companies are doing streaming for the movies they think won't make enough money. So it might be a really good opportunity to try to get in with some of these theaters.
Yeah. So if the company's renting out a screen, then obviously it's still up to the company whether they want to do it or not. But if they're not, or if they might be more willing to do it too, because they're like, we're not really showing anything, especially as more of them go sort of towards streaming and putting movies directly on their streaming services. If that keeps happening, then yeah, theaters will be more open and available. So the landscape could be changing right now, so it is a little bit difficult to figure out. But in the past, it's been that it's harder to get in with a big theater chain when you're an independent project.
A lot of theaters are downsizing as well now, depending on certain areas. So it might be a big chain, but because it's an area that isn't as popular for like moviegoers or whatever, they're downsizing, and that might be your in as well. Might
But
be a good
yeah.
opportunity.
Bigger theaters like and I say that because what is it? AMC, which is like the big one now. The one
Actually,
that
I think the other one filed for bankruptcy, right? Regal, whoever owns Regal Cinema or Regal Theaters, they went bankrupt. So I don't know what's gonna happen to those.
but I do know AMC, the one in Georgetown was the one I used to go to, and that was a pretty popular one. Like Obama's been there, Biden went there like after he won his presidency. So it's a pretty famous little theater over there. And I see now they got signs up like, promoting like rent out a theater for your personal time, like whatever your event is. Like you can go and rent it out just to play video games.
Oh,
Um
cool.
Yeah, I don't think the theater will completely die off, but I definitely feel like there's a shift towards more focusing on movie lovers and independent films and stuff like that,
it's
so
not
that
even
they
it's not
can make their own.
after COVID, they especially I remember the thing when it came out, like they would rent it out for like $100 for like 2 hours. You get the whole theater to yourself. For whatever, like if you wanted to play games, watch the super whatever it is that you wanted to watch, like they opened it up to you. That's how desperate they got. And at first I was like, okay, well, once COVID dies down, that will go away. No, like it's still a thing now. Like there's still like, oh, the prices have gone up a little bit more, but it's a little bit more accessible now. I think after COVID they became more open to that. Just because I guess. Now, of course, like the bigger the theater, the more expensive, of course, but just
I wouldn't say it's. I wouldn't say it's all of them are like permanently like that, because right now it might just be trying to make the money they lost. But yeah, I definitely feel like there are more opportunities now, and there will be more opportunities in the future than there used to be because of it. For sure.
I think a lot of them are like that now. I mean, if AMC is the big one, especially now, they just bought my favorite one. They just bought Bowtie. I'm kind of upset about that. And that was another one they took over. And as soon as they took over, it was like, hey, rent out this theater for however much. Of course, the bigger ones are like, off limits or whatever, and you're competing with the other film industry films that are coming out. But I think they have one that's like dedicated to that kind of thing. The one I did in the Hoyt, which is in Baltimore, they were pretty open. Like they were like, hey, like whatever you guys need, if you want to use our lobby, and like they were loving it. Like you can
Yeah.
whatever you guys want. And of course you're going by their show time. So like we ran out a specific. They didn't really care, just as long as whatever time slot we got is like whatever time slot we wanted is what they gave us. But as long as we were out of there, because as soon as we got out of there, like they were showing another movie. So it was like just be out of here by the time the next showing is, and then you're good for whatever it is. So that's how
Yeah,
it
I
goes.
feel like COVID, with all the negatives, I feel like one positive is they definitely opened the door for a lot more opportunities for smaller creators.
Not even just COVID. The theaters have been going on a downward spiral for a minute, long before COVID.
Yeah.
That's why they have the Super Tuesday. Normal tickets $11, and then on Tuesdays it's like $6-8.
I never think it's going to completely go away, though. I just think it's going to become more of a niche, or more of like a specific type of outing or specific type of people that go to it more.
I hope not, because I'm a theater guy. But little fun fact. We were discussing this in my other group, the script writing group, that there's actually like laws that because my thing is, well, if the theaters are struggling so hard, why don't they produce their own content? Kind of like to do their own Netflix, and the only way to see it is to go to the theater. Kind of boost them back up. Like if they have their own show, like if they had their own Breaking Bad or something they can put on their screens, people will go. You know what I mean? Something you can't get on Netflix or anything else. But I learned that the theater is a completely different entity from the actual filmmaker, so that they're not allowed to do that.
Yep, because the bigger companies, I think it was like Disney and Universal and Fox and whoever else, the big ones at the time were they owned the theaters, I think, or they were trying to, I can't remember what it was, but the reason that law exists is because they didn't want them to be
their main
their
competitor.
overall company that owns like the whole process, the whole distribution of the film. Like we own this, we own the actual release, we own the places that get the tickets, because it started to create a monopoly or an oligopoly or whatever it would be called, of just a few companies owning pretty much every part of the process of filmmaking. Instead, it was something about those kind of laws that they were trying to
And also,
fight against.
and also because companies wanted to be able to focus on producing films, and they didn't want the theaters to, oh, we are going to distribute, but what we're also going to produce. That was also a bit of an anti-competition situation.
They didn't want the store brand to come out. Oh, Star Wars, the store brand movie, Star Wars version of the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think for that, that's an open door for filmmakers now to, especially ones like me that like the theater, to kind of go that route. Like if you make movies exclusively, for theaters, hey, like we're gonna make this film, but it's only gonna, you're taking a big risk, but that's the whole thing about Netflix, Hulu, and all these other places, is they do like the exclusive thing. So it's like, why would somebody get Disney Plus over Netflix? It's because Disney has different shows and Netflix has different shows. So that way people are forced to have them
Because they
both.
have more kids.
Because it's the exclusiveness of it. That's just really what it's all about. Right now, Stranger Things is like the only thing keeping Netflix alive right now. So I think, if somebody were to like, get a light bulb in their head and be like, yo, like this is like the theaters are struggling. They're offering their theaters at a cheaper price nowadays. I could use this as like another, come back up, make it more, because people love exclusiveness. So like if it's a thing like nobody else can see
You're
it,
not feeling special yet.
like you can make a lot of revenue. The theaters would profit off of it. I'm pretty sure they'll open their doors a lot more to you. And but that's just me thinking,
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know the legalities of it, but I think it would be interesting if it's legal. If it isn't illegal for them to do that, then a theater would definitely be more willing to market your film as well, if it was exclusive to their theaters, without them without it, I don't know, like without it being like a legal thing, legal issue. Because I don't know, it would probably fall somewhere in that law that we're talking about, but I'm pretty sure you could probably skirt around it somehow, find a loophole.
like if you're
Because you're not the same company as them, and you're sharing the revenue, you're just exclusively showing it in their theaters because that's what you want to do. So it'd be like one of those, is it a break in the law? Is it not? But I would that's definitely a good idea, I think, as a route. And that's why marketing and distribution is so hard, though, because there is so many routes you could take. You could do that. You could do something else. You could do online only, but it's like everything you choose to do is going to affect your bottom line, your revenue in some extent. So it's either going to affect it for the better, or it's going to affect it for the worse, or it might not really affect it that much at all because you get break even on either way you might have gone. But it's impossible to know. With any given project, because you're only going to release it one way. So you'll never know what the alternative might have been. But yeah, so if you are showing it at a theater, if you're premiering at a theater, weekends, they're good with a lot of people off work, but there's also a lot more activities going on during the weekend. So you'll have more competition, not just with theater, not just with movies, but with other things that they can do, because a lot more places that are date night type places are open on the weekend or have deals or something like that, where people can go there and hang out and do stuff. And other events, other like concerts, whatever else that comes in your area, they usually take place in the weekend. Why? Because more people are off. And so that might mean less people see your film because they're going to see the concert, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that. So keep that in mind. Weekdays, there's less competition, but also less people may be willing to go on a work or a school night, or they might be at work if they work nights. So, those things are things to keep in mind as well. Weekends may also be harder to secure a venue because there's more films that want to premiere, there's more films that want to show, and bigger companies might have more of the screens rented out at that point. He recommends talking to your theater about it, as they may want you or advise one or the other, whether it's better to do the weekends or the weekdays at their theater right now. You can talk to a theater, and if they're always, obviously they're going to want your money. They're going to want you to showcase at their theater because it'll hopefully bring in people and get them to sell concessions and whatever else, or just get you to rent out a space so they get a little bit more money. And so they'll be willing to help you out and figure out how exactly to do it. Even with the big chains, just like Brian was talking about, you still can ask. If you don't believe they're going to, if you believe that it's summer and it's Christmas holiday season, and you're not going to have a chance, you can still contact them and see if it's a possibility. And they might, if they're still in the situation like they are now, they might be desperately wanting you. And so they might be like, yeah, of course, yeah, no, and work with you to be able to get you in there because they need to get that revenue from wherever they can, and you being one of them as an independent filmmaker. So it's always good to talk to them, get in contact with them and figure it out and see what's the best course and kind of get some advice from them on when they think premiering might be best in their theater at that time of year, throughout what day. Thursday can also be a good day to do a weekday night if you do choose to do weekdays, because you can make it a preview night with the official premiere on Friday night, but then there's a preview on Thursday night. It's pretty much your premiere, but you just call it something else so that you can still have the official premiere tomorrow. But whoever comes on Thursday, they still see the exact thing. It's just a preview of the film, but it's the actual film itself. Large films do this all the time. And that's why you'll have people that go on Thursdays or it launches at a certain time. And so they're out there waiting at the theater if they really want to see it. And that's just to draw in both crowds, the people who can do it on the weekdays and the people who can do it on the weekends. And to make it seem like a bigger event on that Friday, they call it that official premiere, while it's the preview night on Thursday. So it's kind of like basically it's just wordplay to get people more interested in it, when really all it is showing the film one night and then showing it again the next night. But ultimately, it'll be up to you which route you decide to take. And that's going to be one of the choices of the many choices that you have to make when talking about distribution and marketing. You have to be sure to market it to the local press, radio, newspaper, as well as online social media websites, and possibly do some ads promoting your film premiere in that area. They say, don't disregard old media like a newspaper. Not many people read the newspaper anymore, but if you do have a local newspaper, don't just disregard it. Use whatever you can, whatever avenues that are available to you to try to promote your thing, because you're not sure who might read that newspaper and decide to come see your film premiere. They might read the local news and see that there's a film here. Oh, that's interesting. And then do it. If they were online, they might just glance over it as another film that they've seen an ad for. So don't disregard local stuff. Don't disregard smaller publications or old ways of media like newspapers and radio, because those can still benefit you. This is also where having a social media presence from the film's beginning will come in handy, as you'll already have somewhat of a following. So if you started building your audience before you started filming or while you were filming, you hopefully have built a little bit of an online presence, a little bit of a social media following, even if it's only a few people or a few hundred people or however many it may be. Hopefully you have somewhat of something that you can promote it to, and you'll have more people aware that it's going to be happening. You also want to consider hiring a photographer to take photos of the event and the guests on the red carpet in front of your logos. These get shared on social media and spread awareness of your film, your company, and your logo. For theirs, they included a professional photo on the red carpet as part of the price of the ticket, to entice people to come more. So they made it more of an event with the ticket. With this, if you pay $20, instead of saying you'll pay $20 to see the film, or like you'll pay $20, you get to see the film premiere for the first time. You get a professional photo on the red carpet, make it sound like it's a bigger deal, make it more of an event. And that helped to drive ticket sales for their project. And they actually I think they made back most of their budget because it was a really small independent film.
Yeah, and you would in that independent film you can use the crew. Like, let's say you have someone in there who's really good at photography. He can take the professional pictures so people feel like, they're part of something special or whatever. You can get the person that was in charge of a set design to design the red carpet and stuff like that. Like, you can still utilize your skeleton crew for the premiere as well.
Yeah, if they're available.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And that way they already know you and you've already worked with them, and you're not hiring somebody new to do the event. Of course, if they want to enjoy the event, then you don't want to kind of give them work. So there is that too, but it is something to keep in mind. Like she said, if you already have somebody that was taking behind the scene photos, production stills on your production, you can utilize them maybe to take photos on your premiere night. Because the other thing you can do with professional photos is use them in the marketing, press, if you have any local news about it, about a film. After the premiere night, you can send it out to the local news again to say, hey, look, we have these new photos from that night. We're still premiering, we're still showing our film. So that way when the premiere night had sales of this and that, they have photos to go along with it if they want to make a story on it, write a story on it.
Or even market their next film. You can show how well you marketed the last one.
Yeah. And then also, of course, your social media, you can show like, hey, first night was a success, and then show photos of it.
And then
Get people interested to see.
Yeah, and then more people want to fund your films in the future because they'll see what you did with a small budget and how well it was. Like, okay, so if we give you money, you can actually do quite a lot with it.
Yeah, you're strategic, you plan with it, you make the most out of what you have. And it shows, and it also just shows professionalism for later on. You want to think of other elements you can add to add some zing to your event. They were doing a Valentine's movie and they had burlesque dancers, pre-screening drinks, and more to try to make it more of a unique event, make it more interesting and have things going on that isn't just the film itself. And it was Valentine's, so they were trying to, they had like the red overall, of course, the red carpet already adds to that element, but their theme was very Valentine's-esque with like a lot of red and a lot of like suit, tie, would dress up, look fancy. And then we have burlesque dancers, we have pre-screening drinks that you guys can come enjoy with us before we screen the film. You can talk to us and make it more of an event. And that way they help to sell the tickets because they added all of that in there. The ticket price comes with the drink, it comes with this. You can see burlesque dancers, you can watch the film, you can
Make a day.
have that professional photo. That was the other thing. So yeah, they added a few different things into the ticket to make it a day, make it an event rather than just the film. And that way that ticket price, even though it's more expensive than other movies around the area, maybe it's more worth it because there's more stuff to it. Consider what personal.
More than just a film, it's an experience.
Yeah, it's an experience, something that they might not have ever experienced before. Not many people have experienced film premieres as much as they've experienced going to a mini golf course or something. So
especially because if it's a really nice film premiere, they might think, oh wow, they're nice with like such a small budget. They're probably going to be something one day, and I can say that I went to this or like, oh, this company might be something one day, and I get to say that I went to one of their first premieres. Like, imagine someone about A24 when they were like really small. I went to the first A24 premiere.
Yeah, and they have the photo to prove it. They have the event ticket and all that. So
yeah, a lot of people think that's like really fun and cool bragging rights.
So you want to always consider what personal elements you can add and touches that relate to your company or your film that you can add to make it just, just something small. It doesn't have to cost a huge crap ton of money. You don't even have to hire people sometimes, but you can set up something that's maybe sort of like the film itself. And you can take photos. These are actual set pieces we use. These are actual props. If it's something interesting, if it's a fantasy film or a sci-fi film, you might have unique looking props and costumes and allow people to use those in some photos or something. And that way you add a little touch of a different element than what they would get from anywhere else because it's stuff from your actual production. Or like I said, it could just be, little event type things like drinks or a question and answers with the director, crew, and cast. We're going to have that after or before we premiere our film. So be here for that.
It could be something as simple as like buttons or t-shirts too, like little things to make you feel part of the team or like if it's a specific.
I wouldn't say t-shirts because t-shirts are pretty expensive if you're gonna buy them
that's
in
true.
bulk.
Like little props that are cheap, if you can afford it. Like masks, maybe those are cheap. If it's a mystery, if it has to do with the story, like a mask or something, those would be cheap to make or to buy.
Yeah, and that way it just kind of adds to the element of what this film is.
Yeah.
And just, again, it helps the experience of the night. Right before screening your film, be sure to announce yourself and give your speech. Thank everyone for coming, your cast and crew. And if you're emotional, let it out. It'll help your audience connect to you and your film. Once you're done speaking, announce your film. Yeah, don't try to force it.
This matters. This means so much to me, you guys.
Just be genuine, and I'm sure if it is a big thing for you, you've accomplished something great. You've accomplished a film, you've finished a web series, you've finished a TV show, you've done something, and your cast and crew should be proud no matter how it turned out exactly, because finishing it in the first place is already hard enough for independent filmmakers. So finishing it alone is something to be proud of and have an accomplished and feel accomplished for. So while you're up there, if you're getting kind of weepy, don't just try to hold it in, let it out, because it can actually help your audience connect to you and feel more excited about your film. And they might even like it more because they know how much work went into it just from that small speech you made.
I would just suggest be careful if you're way too much of a cry, because then you can make people feel uncomfortable. So like cry a little, like you can let it out a little and like, this means so much to me, thanks guys. But if you're just gonna sob, that might be a little awkward.
Well, yeah.
So just careful with that.
But once you're done speaking, announce your film and take your seat and let the movie play. So here is blah, 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 blah film. And it starts. After the film, get back on the stage out in front. Let everyone know what's next. Like if you have anything after the premiere, like meet the director, cast, crew, we're going to be over there. Or if you have like after premiere photos, sessions or something, or drinks or whatever else, you obviously let them know what the next part of this event is, if there's anything, so that if they choose to, they can stay and do something else, or they can leave after the premiere's over.
Pictures with the director, like even if it's a small director, they're like, oh, this director might be somebody one day, so I want to say that I have a picture with him just in case, this movie goes somewhere.
It might not even be for that. It might just be, hey, we really liked your film and I'd like a picture with you. Not, oh, maybe they'll have
no, you know
clout.
What I mean. You know what I mean.
Maybe they'll have a lot of clout later and I can show off the picture.
You know what I mean. Like it's both.
I know. I'm just kidding. And you also want to make sure to give a call to action at the end. You can usually show this on the screen, but if you don't have a preset up, like something on the screen, like with your website or whatever, you can also announce it with a microphone. Like us on Facebook, follow us on this and that, sign up for our newsletter, let everyone you know what you thought of the film, and invite them this weekend because we'll be gone the next, or invite them to come see the film, and whatever call of action you want to make.
We'll only be here for 1 week, so if you want your friends to watch it, we recommend.
So, tell everyone to come see it. It will really help us out. We really appreciate it. whatever you want to say, but make sure you have one clear call to action and you don't jumble it up with 30 different things.
Yeah, no, that
Um,
makes sense.
Yeah, you
Sounds
don't want to
fun.
give
I
them
think
too much to do because, yeah, like Priscilla said, it's a lot of work and hard to remember. So one clear thing to do to get them to either follow you and become part of your fan base or to
Ooh.
spread the word about your film.
Make
Yeah,
sure
we
that
did-
all your social medias are like either the exact same or very similar. Because I've seen that people make that mistake where it's like, oh, follow us on Facebook on this, on Instagram on that, and blah, blah, but they're like different.
Yeah, it was actually what we talked about when we talked about social media. You want to keep your usernames unanimous across the board. That way it's easy to remember to follow you. And if they want to follow you on a different social media platform, they can look up the exact same name and find you or not if you're not on that platform.
Yeah, I just give that reminder to keep that in mind and try to make everything concise, because that can be really frustrating too if you have like a super common name that there's a bunch, or you have a different name for every social media platform and they're trying to follow you. Makes it really hard and frustrating.
Yeah, so you want to keep it unanimous and easy to follow you. Because if people remember even, part of your name, they might be able to remember and then figure it out and look up that information to find you.
And please try to make it somewhat unique, because if you make it something that's super similar to a bunch of other companies, a lot of people might accidentally follow them instead of.
Well, this goes in with making a company before you even start making a film.
I
So,
know, but I just want to keep like that reminder,
this isn't happening in the premiere.
because I've seen, no, I know, but I've seen that be like a big mistake where when you're at the premiere process, that's great, but your name is super generic and people end up following the wrong person because of that. And then you lose that audience that you fought so hard to get.
Right, because they can't find you.
Exactly.
Well, that's why you just have like your persona that is only for audience to see, and then you have your because you have to be like perfect, right? If you
It doesn't
promote
matter if you have a persona, you need to have a name that they can actually follow. If
No,
they're not
I
gonna follow
realize.
your persona, they're not gonna Google, oh, this persona here. Like they need the name.
Well, not really a persona, it's just your professional view, I guess. Sorry, it's too far. What I meant is when you're like performing or you're inviting an audience and you present differently than you do at home.
Yeah, I'm talking about following on social media though. That's
Yeah, but it's the same thing. They're gonna follow you for whatever your unique sell is. And all you
yeah,
have
but
to
they
do
need
for that
to
is
find you is what I
consistent and
mean.
love
Like
it.
that's my point, is like, how are they going to find you if you have the same name as like a million others and like a generic logo and a generic name?
Then make a new name for that. That's simple. That's easy enough. Lots of people do that. If you want, you can either have a business name that you are under. That way you're not personally attached to it. You can use a fake name for yourself. There's options. That's pretty simple fix.
Yeah, you just want to make sure it's unique and try to make it unique enough to stand out. Make it easy to be able to follow. And like I said, call an action to it to get them to follow or to spread the word of the message. Whatever's most important to you at that time, whether it's the most views for this film, or I'm trying to build a following from this film for future projects. Whatever your main focus is, you want to use that time, that space right after the film, right after everyone's seen it, to invite everyone to do that. So if they did like it, they do want to see what you can do next, they can follow you. Or if they did like it, they can remember to spread the word to other people, because sometimes just telling people to do that or reminding them, hey, if you could, this would really help me out, can jog it in their mind like, oh, wow, yeah, I wasn't even considering that, but of course I will because I really like the film, rather than just not saying anything and expecting them to do it. Sometimes people don't even really think about it. But then if they hear it, that it's going to help you, they might be more willing to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense that it's going to help them. I should do that. And I do want to help them because I like what they're doing. So call to actions are always important to leave off with. And that's the same, the marketing, of course, that goes with marketing across social media, that goes with anything, any event you do, you always want to leave off with some kind of call to action for your audience to do if they choose. This next stuff comes from michaelarel.com. It's letter C in the syllabus. Remember that a premiere is not a test screening. A premiere should be your final master of the film, show, or web series. Also, you can and should bring DVDs, posters, and merch if you have it that people can purchase while they're there. It's another thing that they can do on the spot, that they don't have to go buy merch here on this website, whatever. Bring some if you have it, set up a little booth, make it unique. Well, not unique, but make it to your film, make it match your film style, basically. And just showcase it so that people know that there's something there. You can have party one of your crew, or you can have somebody behind the booth if you feel like people are going to steal stuff, or you can leave it kind of out in the open with somebody down the hall a little bit looking at it to oversee that people don't steal stuff, and that way they buy it. However you want to set it up, just, you know, obviously you don't want theft to happen, but you can do the sales however it works in that area, wherever you are. No matter where you're hosting your premiere, if you have merch and if you have your DVDs already, you want to bring it. That way, even if people don't care about actually watching a DVD, they can help support you if they choose. And they can do it right then and there after they see the film while it's fresh in their mind, and just help you out in that way.
Yeah, some people will just want to buy it to support you.
Exactly.
They never,
Even if they never actually watch DVDs.
even if they
that's
don't even own a DVD player, they just want to support you.
Yeah, and that gives them another way to be able to do that without just literally handing you money. So just think of that, because that's one of the best places you're going to have people. There's a reason why when you go to a concert, they have t-shirts and whatever available off to the side. It's because while you're at the concert, that's the main thing in your mind, and that's where you're going to be the most likely to buy that stuff, rather than going online later, looking up the movie or the concert again, and then buying the stuff from there. It's also a piece of memorabilia that people can keep forever from that event. So if they had a really good time at the event, they might just want to buy something that you have to remember it always. So just keep that in mind. Having merch and stuff, if you're doing a premiere, it's always a good idea. Other places you might set up to premiere could be at a park. You know, of course, you have to get permission from the park and everything. Or even your backyard with a theater screen if you want an outdoor venue. Or if you can't afford a regular like theater venue or something like that, there are some cheaper options which don't automatically make your film less. You know, if you're doing a backyard venue, it's still cool, it's still interesting. It's just maybe not going to be as big of an event, but you can still, again, make it as big as you can with as small of a budget that you have. You always want to make it feel bigger than it is. You can still get the red carpet, you can still do the photos and all of that stuff, even if it's just at your house or somebody else's backyard or at a park or something like that. Of course, with the outdoor venues, weather becomes a challenge and audio becomes a bigger challenge, but it is possible to do, and I've seen it done. So keep those in mind. There's quite a few places. Anywhere you can have a meeting or a gathering or a conference room of some sort, you can do a film premiere as long as you get the permission from whatever venue you're using. Unless it's your house, of course, then you can just invite people over. Next up comes from premiumbeat.com. It's letter D in the syllabus. You can also host an online premiere, online only. You can use YouTube, Vimeo, Twitch, Amazon Live, Watch Together. That's watch with the number 2 and then gather, and Gaze, one of those platforms to host a live premiere online. You can sell tickets or request donations. That way people don't have to be charged for the tickets maybe, but if they choose to, they can help donate. Whatever avenue you wish to take with that, you can. You can do the same thing in person, actually. Like if you do a venue at a theater or something, you don't have to charge tickets. Most people do just because they want to try to make back the cost of hosting there. But some people will just request donations and hope that people will give money, regardless of whether it's forced upon them or not. So that way they get more people in because it's free. But with online, again, that's less of an event. So it's more just about the film. So that is something you might want to consider, especially because it's not costing you to do a venue at that point. So you can choose to, whatever route you want to take, just know that less people will come, less people will watch it. If you sell tickets, more people will come, but you might make less revenue if less people donate, if you choose to do the donation route instead. So that's another choice you'll have to make if you choose to do online or in person, is whether you want to charge tickets or request donations. Another thing you consider with online premieres is collaborating with other filmmakers to create a sort of premiere festival on your own. That way your audiences may overlap and it can benefit you and the other filmmakers. You could set up like a 3-day weekend or something like that, where you're showcasing a few different films from local filmmakers, or it doesn't have to be local. Online, you could collaborate with people all over the United States, all over the world, even if the time zones line up enough. That way it'll allow you to pool your resources for joint marketing. You can say the premiere of this by this company, this movie by that company, this movie by that company. And it can help to pool your audience as well and make it more of an event. So online premiering, you can do something like that maybe, and that can help you to share the cost and share the responsibilities with some other people. Be sure whether you have a venue or not, that you are early to test equipment, and be sure everything is set up properly, as well as greet your guests if any arrive early. So whether you're in person or whether you do it online, you always want to test it. Make sure you're testing it, make sure everything's working properly, because you don't want people to come to the premiere, whether in person or online, and you're having technical issues that's making it not work. Of course, that can happen in the moment, but you want to try to test it out and get it as close to working as possible, making sure everything works as much as you can set up for and as much as you can prepare for before the actual event itself, because that happening makes it feel cheaper. Makes it feel like less of a professional setup, less of a professional premiere. So just be aware of that. Be sure to always check out the stuff and make sure everything's working. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about film premieres? All right. Next thing we're talking about is test screening. Test screening is not really, I mean, it can sort of be used for marketing, which is why I put it with marketing, but it's kind of a tool to use while you're editing a film, while you're doing post-production on a film, more than it is for marketing. But you can use it for marketing to kind of help you find your target market or your target audience, which we'll talk about in just a second. Move that out of the way. All right. So this stuff comes from medium.com. It's letter C in the syllabus under test screenings. Test screenings are done before a film is 100% finalized. Usually it's at one of the latest stages of post-production for independent films, but it can be at pretty early stages, like after the rough cut is done for large budget films. It just depends on how much they want to test it out and like how much feedback from audiences they want to receive during the process. But for independent films, they usually leave it till one of the final stages of post-production, typically because it costs money to do test screenings. It's renting out a venue of some sort to showcase it, usually, unless you're doing it online. And so they usually only are able to do it once or twice, maybe, if at all. And so they usually wait until it's pretty much done so they can hear, like, do people hate the ending? Do I need to change the ending? Is there any big problems with any scenes or any technical issues that I haven't seen happen yet? That's going to happen when I test screen this to people. And that's why independent filmmakers will do it. Test screenings are done to hear what the audience thinks of the film, but also to figure out who likes it and what demographic to target the marketing to. And it usually advises a lot of the decisions of how they're going to market the film once they start seeing who's liking it and who's not. The film at the stage is generally complete enough to show without visual effects, sound, picture, or technical issues. If it's a independent film. Everything is pretty much complete when showing it to test audiences on indie films. The test screeners are usually selected from a cross-section of the population, but can also be selected to gauge different demographics individually instead of a mixed audience. So if you're consider do 15 to 25-year-olds like this film? What about 35 to 45-year-olds? Depending on the production and how many test screenings you do, they might mix those age groups for a screening and invite 15 to 25-year-olds and 35 to 45-year-olds all at once, or they might test screen it to both groups, one after the other, to see who likes it the most out of those two audiences. The audience is given some form with questions on it, something like this, about the film, or asked to leave feedback in some way. Everything from changing the title to changing the ending is possible after a test screening. With independent films, it's a little bit less because obviously changing stuff, doing rewrites or reshoots, or changing around a scene is going to cost more money. And so depending on the budget, you might not be able to change as much. But with large budgeted films, they can typically anything can be changed. Usually stuff isn't, but there are films that have been changed drastically based on bad test screenings where nobody in the audience likes it, or they're all saying the same stuff of what the problems are. And they try to fix those problems as best as they can before they finalize the film. Test screening is recommended even for starting filmmakers, as the data gathered can help entice distributors to pick it up and give the filmmaker the chance to improve their film before its release. So if you do test screening, you have data there. If people liked the film, if a bunch of people were saying, oh, the film was really good or it was excellent, and I would recommend it to people, and then they describe like why they liked it, it will be better. It'll give you more leverage when trying to get distributors or sales agents to attach themselves to your film and help you distribute it later, because it'll show them that people do like this film, that I have a target audience. And everyone who was male between the ages of 15 to 35, they all said that they thought the film was very good. And clearly it's probably not going to be that simple, but it'll show the majority of them probably did this or that. And then it'll give you more of a reason to say, I know who my target market is. I know who we're going to market this to. And I know that there is an audience for this film and that people like it. And so you have more leverage when going to try to make a distribution deal. Some test screenings can take place before visual effects and some other elements are completed. The audience will be asked not to judge the films on those aspects yet to be completed in those cases, those yet to be completed. So if there's anything that's not yet completed, they're like, please don't judge it based on this scene that still has green screen in it. We're going to add footage of this and that in this scene. People still do, I heard. Actually, I shared a video with everyone, if everyone watched it, where he talked about that. Like, people will still judge stuff based on those kind of scenes, but then whoever's making the test screening, the producer, whoever's doing it, running it, they don't really pay attention to that, because obviously that person didn't pay attention to what was requested, which is don't judge this green screen scene because obviously it's going to be green screen. So if they're like, I didn't understand the scene that had green in the background, it's because they didn't pay attention, that they weren't supposed to. That's not finished yet. But for everyone else who says, there's a problem with the scene, the character's acting like this and that, that could be something to actually look into. Like I said, test screening isn't free, which is why it can be difficult for independent filmmakers to do it and why some choose not to do it. You have to pay for a venue to hold the test screening at, typically a theater, and may have to pay to promote the test screening so that people actually come to it. For a cheaper option, however, you can hold online test screenings. It won't offer the level of control or interaction you'd get from a theatrical screening, but you'll still get feedback from the audience, so it can still be useful. It is best not to fill a test screening with friends, relatives, or sometimes fans, because they will be too emotionally invested in giving a positive review instead of honest feedback. The point of a test screening is, will the general audiences like this? Will people that I don't know pay to watch it and be satisfied with what they've seen and spread the word to others that this movie is good? That is the main reason for it. It's to perfect your film as best you can before you release it. So you want honest feedback. What's working? What's not working? What's not working, can I change it? Can I make it better before I release this thing? Or can I not? At least I know where the problems lie. Ideally, you want strangers from all walks of life with concentration of people who you think are your target audience to be the test screening audience. So you want, of course, different people, because the test screening, the audience you thought might be your target audience may not like it. And you're like, oh, I had my target audience pegged, I thought, but I was wrong. This other group of people like it, not the original group that I had in mind. Teenagers actually don't like it. It's actually adults that are liking it more. I thought teenagers would. I guess I was wrong. So whatever you find out in your test screenings that can help you lead to understanding who your target demographic is for your film. And that's why you want strangers with, again, a concentration of people in your target audience. You want most of them to be who you think your target audience is, because hopefully you've done enough research and stuff to figure out and be close to who your target audience is if you're not perfectly spot on. But if you do have a good idea of who they are, then they will be the ones that you hope like your film the most. And if they have problems with it, on top of everyone else having problems with it, then you know that there's something wrong. And hopefully you can try to fix it before you release. This next stuff comes from the HollywoodReporter.com. It is letter C in the syllabus. Oh, it's not the, it's just HollywoodReporter.com. According to HollywoodReporter.com, for larger budget projects, test screenings may happen as soon as a rough cut is put together, often with a temporary score and no credit sequence. The large budget films cost $10,000 to $20,000 to test screen, with around 300 to 500 people as the audience. There's usually the questionnaire and ratings: excellent, very good, good, okay, and poor, which you see on the left. Was the film excellent, good, very good, good, fair, or poor? And recommendations of I'll definitely, I'll probably, I might, or I won't recommend this film to others. And you'll see that right here. Those are the two main things that test screening, like big companies, will look at whenever they're doing test screenings. If people liked it, they have to do very good or excellent. And yes, definitely is pretty much the only one they pay attention to, because if people are like, yeah, I'll probably tell people to watch this film, then they're most likely not going to. But if they're like, yeah, I'm definitely going to recommend this film to others, that's the only ones that they take seriously. And they look at all that information, and then they add it all up with all the rest of the information and figure out how much of the audience liked it, who in the audience liked it, and other analytics like that based on the feedback that was given. Researchers are also typically show the films to focus groups of 20 or fewer viewers who discuss in detail their feedback, usually with the filmmakers present. So they'll also have focus groups where they show the film to a small group of people, and those people will be in the same room with the filmmakers so that the filmmakers can hear what the problems are in detail instead of just quick comments or quick mentions of what people liked and what they didn't. They'll be like, well, seeing this, that, he seems like he's like that, but then he kind of changes course and I don't understand why. He seems like he just flipped a 180 in his head. And, then they'll look at that, they'll hear the feedback and decide what to do with it, whether to try to change the film based on it or to ignore it and go through with whatever their original idea was. Many productions hold 3 to 5 test screenings for their film. And one research executive recalls going through 19 on one film. So there's no limit or minimum, but the average is about 3 to 5 usually. But yeah, it can be multiples depending on how bad the film's being received and how many times they need to retest it. Some studios also opt out of holding any test screenings in order to not let any leaks about the film or the story out. Another reason being a visual effects heavy film without ready visual effects may not be tested very well, possibly. So they sometimes will choose not to showcase a film like that because they're like, nobody's gonna like it because we don't have it ready at all. So there's no way we're gonna be able to know what's working, what's not, because they'll just be focused on this hideous CGI, these animations, or even just this text on screen that says what's happening. A few tips from movingimageeducation.org are to not ask leading questions, as it's harder for audiences to answer those honestly. What did you think of the relationship between the characters? Something you might want to ask instead of asking, was it clear that Dave does not like his father? Let the audience speak their mind and then ask those kinds of questions later down in the questionnaire. You don't want to sway their opinions by making them be like, oh, he didn't like his father? I guess that makes sense. And then they act like it makes sense when really they didn't get it until you ask that specific question, which is why you don't want to ask leading questions. You want them to be open-minded and be kind of generic, to hear what they think, and then start asking those questions later on. So you hear their opinion first, and then you can also say, did that make sense? And see if they say yes or no. Another tip is to not listen to every bit of feedback, making changes here and there to your film if it's coming from 1 or 2 people. Hopefully you have a good group of people and you're going to hear a bunch of different feedback. That doesn't mean you need to change every aspect of your film because one person didn't understand that. I didn't understand their relationship. I didn't know that was his dad. That doesn't mean you have to add a line that it was his dad if everyone else is like, yeah, that made perfect sense. Because obviously there was just that one person that didn't get it. And there's always going to be 1 or 2 people that have certain feedback that just
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. Yeah. So kind of dumb. In the video I shared with everybody in
Or
the
they're just
WhatsApp,
confused.
he was like, I think it was some animal, but I'm just going to say penguins. I really like penguins, and there's no penguins in this movie. It has nothing to do with the film, but it's just some feedback the person left because they want to see penguins. It doesn't mean that the movie should add penguins in it. It just means that one person didn't like it because it didn't have penguins.
Sometimes it's just what they were in the mood that day, and they're like, oh, this wasn't what I was wanting this particular day. Sometimes they were expecting something different. Sometimes they're just what's the word I'm looking for?
Stupid.
No.
Well, sometimes they just don't get the movie, so they
That's
seem
true,
stupid.
that's true,
Like
that's true.
they might not be a stupid person, but their comment is very stupid because it doesn't make any sense with the movie.
One thing that you'll see a lot is if you IMDb or even look up reviews for films that are like more for preteens or early or teenagers or whatever, you'll always find a few comments of people like, this is awesome, or this is stupid because her hair wasn't pretty, or what. Like you'll see obvious comments, and even adult movies too, you'll see comments that are like, what? And you'll see in the person's like 35. And so it really depends. There's also spamming. That's another thing. They don't have anything interesting to say, so they say something silly. So yeah, that's always something to expect.
Yeah, so just don't listen to every single bit of feedback and don't make changes to everything if it's just 1 or 2 people in your audience, especially depending on how big of an audience you had. If nobody else is saying the same thing, then you probably don't need to change anything. However, if it is the majority or it's unanimous across the board with everybody saying the same thing, then you usually want to be sure to listen to it and most likely implement changes. If nobody understood that your son character didn't like the father character and you were trying to show that because it's a part of the film or it's a big part of it or something, You probably want to change something or add something or take something out or just remove that entirely, because if it's not making sense to them, it's not going to make sense to whoever else you're trying to show it to.
It's not like, oh, everyone is saying. Sometimes if it's the majority of people and they're your target audience, you have to be like, okay, yeah, there's something I need to change.
Right. And that's why you want to focus mostly on the target audience that you believe is going to like the film, because you want to hear what they have to say mostly. And again, you might find that your target audience is different than what you first expected. In that case, you might want to test screen it again on some other group of people that's more close to the new target audience you found might like it. See if they say the same thing. The reason why large productions will have so many so many test screenings is because they are trying to see who likes it and who doesn't. And if everybody's saying the same thing across different groups of people, age groups, ethnicities, genders, if all of them are saying the same thing, or if it's like, okay, I see a pattern here. Women like it more than men, and women between the ages of this and that like it more, blah, 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 blah.
Or men are the ones that maybe might not be understanding it, because if you have a target audience that's both men and women, and only women are able to resonate to it, then that's a problem too, if you want both target audiences. So you're like, okay, I need to make this maybe a little more relatable to men, or I need to
I would say you
change-
just change your target audience in that case.
No, yeah, that too. But that depends on what kind of film you want to make. If you want a film that you want it to speak to both sexes and you want it to.
But if it's not, then focus your attention on the one it's speaking to.
No, yeah, that's, your strengths and weaknesses, but like at the end of the day, that depends on what you want to do and what you want to say with your film.
With marketing, it doesn't matter. When we're talking about marketing, we're talking about sales. It doesn't matter if you're trying to do something for a film where you just want to spread a message, where you're just trying to say something, then okay. But realize that with marketing, it's not going to work exactly how you've perceived if it isn't working that way.
Yeah,
If you are trying to speak to men and women, but it's only appealing to women and you're doing test screenings and whatever else, your general audience, your men are still not going to like it. So they're going to be less inclined to see it or care. So just because you're trying to doesn't mean that it's working. And that is when you have to be adaptable and be like, if you're going for that, that's fine. But just for marketing purposes, you are trying to get the most sales you want. If you don't care about marketing, that's one thing. But if you are trying to get your money and everything, you need to be able to adapt your target audience to whoever is actually liking the film.
Yeah, especially
That's
if you
exactly
have
what these test screenings are for.
Yeah, especially if you have a small budget and you can't afford to like rewrite the whole thing. You're like, oh, well, this is the audience I have. I need to work with my strengths and what I have.
Right, because you don't have as big of a budget, so you want to focus and hone in on the people that are actually going to resonate with your film and like it most, and then expand from there. Instead of being like, how can I completely adapt my film to make sure that men understand this too?
I explained it in a stupid way.
No, I'm just saying like that's a lot more work to do than
No,
just
yeah.
changing who you're marketing it to.
No, definitely. Yeah.
So you can do it. It's just going to be a lot more work, a lot more expensive, and it might not even work out if men are just like, I don't really care for it. And you're trying to make them, forcing somebody to like something is pretty hard to.
No, they either like it or they don't. Like that's why you have like,
Right.
You don't want to waste your time. So that's why you have the log lines, right? If they don't like the log
then you're
lines,
wasting
you're not
your
even gonna
time
waste your time.
too, because you're like, I'm trying so hard to get this audience, this target audience, this audience to like it, but only the other audience does. At the end
Then
of the
market to
day,
the
you
other
gotta
audience.
concede like maybe this is the audience for me, for this film, for this particular film,
Exactly.
and that's okay. You're not gonna
Totally.
please everyone. You're not going to resonate with everyone. Find
No,
your
and you
niche,
don't
find
wanna,
your
like,
audience, and
force.
go with that.
Yeah, you can't force it. Like you want to intrigue, make interest, and have them come to you. That's like the best thing. Marketing, and then like just make it happen, and the team happen. Be like, okay, this sells, and we know the basic things that sell: food, sex. The basic principles that you can have underlying underneath things: family, heartwarming, those things, and then you can play around with everything on top. Autistic, if you like. I mean, like underlying themes at a basic level, know who your target market is from my understanding, and then just build your unique vision on top of it. Right? So if you have like this crazy story, you don't think it'll sell, but you actually infuse it with things that would sell, it'll most likely sell, right? Because it's been infused with something like that is a big seller. So you could take those risks and be like, I'm not sure if this is going to be a big hit, but you take those risks anyway and you make it happen. But like you use like the basic, marketing schemes. You don't try to rewrite everything or rewrite an entire system.
Yeah, let's keep going before I die.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. And I think that's why it's so important. We'll talk about target audiences, target market, target demographic. It's all the same thing, but we'll talk about that, I think Thursday actually, but it's one of the most important things for you as an independent filmmaker. And even if you're on a big budget, a large AAA studio, it's the most important thing to figure out who the target audience is. Who are we targeting this to with our marketing? Who's going to like this film? And that's why it's important to start that stuff early on before you even start writing it. If you are trying to make money with your film, you want to make sure there is an audience for your film. If you find that there is no audience for your film, then you might not want to make it if you're just trying to make money on it. If you're trying to spread a message only and you don't care about whether it makes money or not, then you can do whatever you want.
And good for you if you can afford that.
But if you're trying to do a mixture of both, or if you're trying to do a film that you like, but it's going to make money, then you definitely need to make sure there's an audience for it. Because if there's not, audiences aren't just going to magically appear. You have to find an audience for your project.
And as filmmakers, I feel like we do also need to accept that not everyone is going to like or resonate with our film or understand it and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, if we manage to find an audience that loves it and that is willing to support it, that's an amazing thing. And that's all any like creative could ever ask for.
Yeah, all right, this next stuff comes from blog.frame.io. It's letter F in the syllabus under test screenings. At test screenings, you generally don't want industry people or filmmakers in the audience. They watch films in a different way and either critique more or less than an average audience member would. If it's a filmmaker that wants to support independent filmmakers, they may leave more positive feedback than a regular moviegoer who's just like, no, this doesn't work for me because it's cheap looking in this. When someone else is trying to support independent filmmakers, they understand the struggle, they understand that the budget's not there, and they might be more willing to be like, it was good, with what you had, you did really good. And that isn't the feedback that you need when you're trying to make something the best it can be. As well as industry people, like people who write movie reviewers or press or anybody who's involved in the movie industry in some way or form. You don't really want them there because they're not going to watch the film in the same way that a general audience would. So you don't want them there. Like, just think about us in our group. Every time we watch a movie, we are critiquing everything because we're learning all this stuff and we're seeing where they're messing up, where they're doing good.
Even when you're not trying to, you can't help it anymore when you know what to look for.
Right. And so a general audience, they might not care about, like, they might not notice that the shot is obviously green screen or something, but with a filmmaker that's looking for it, like they didn't shoot at the thing. There was a blinking thing over there that made it look like this, or their outline is very different.
I don't know if that's the best example with green screen, because
not obvious, but something less obvious than, they're using a miniature background. It's a miniature set in the background. I can tell because of that one element that I noticed in the corner. Somebody else, they're not really going to notice those things as much.
I was watching a video reaction to like the video breakdown of a few movies from like my early childhood, teenage years, blah, 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 like teen movies from the 2000s. And the amount of shots where you could see the boom pole that I never noticed in my life. Like these are movies I've watched almost like every year almost that I really loved. And the person was breaking it down and they're like, boom pole, boom mic, boom mic. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I never notice that?
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's not just with that type of stuff, like with the visuals, it could be with something audible. The audio could be like distorted somewhere. maybe not on purpose, but a general audience wouldn't really notice
The
and think it's
ADR.
done on purpose.
Now I'm noticing more the ADR, like when it's obviously recorded somewhere else.
When you didn't notice it before. And also then, of course, story, you know, like, oh, you really should have finished his arc in act 3 at the beginning because of this and that and this, instead of doing it right. Other audiences, general audiences, they don't really pay as much of attention to that type of stuff, and they just know whether they like a film or not. So get non-film people for your test screening, or at least for the majority. You can have a few people in there so they can give those really deep and intellectual critiques about like the different little things. So you can have that nitpicky stuff in there as well, if you want to keep that in mind and have some of that feedback. But for a test screening, the general consensus is to have non-film people, a regular audience, so that you can see if general audiences are going to like it. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to make you money. They're the ones who are going to make you the most revenue, because there's more people that aren't in film than there are that are in the industry. If you have specific questions about certain scenes, moments, or etc., save those for last. Like I said earlier, you don't want to sway the opinions of the audience before they have a chance to voice them. So at the beginning, ask more general questions. At the end, you can, if you have a specific scene that you're kind of afraid isn't working, you want to see if it's not working for everyone else or if it's just in your head, then you can ask later on in the questionnaire. You may get some notes that are pretty vague, so the key is to look for the meaning behind the note. I was a little bored. Probably means that the pacing was a little bit too slow, or there were too many long scenes or long shots. And so it's something worth looking into. It's a little hard to figure out exactly why they were bored, but that's why you have to kind of figure out, you know, what could this mean? Why could they have been bored? What are some things that can make an audience member feel bored? Dragging on for too long with something, maybe an arc is taking too long. Maybe there's some scene you can cut out to make it feel a lot quicker from point A to point B. There's something unneeded there. We don't need to see him walk all the way out of the house, going all the way to the car. We can just cut from him leaving the door to opening the car door. Little things like that can start to add up and make it feel more more quick, the pacing a little bit faster, quicker shots as well if you have them. Obviously that can speed up a scene. So certain things like that you can look for within the notes if it's pretty vague. You also want to make sure to leave your ego at the door. And just because you love something or spend a long time working on it, if it's not working, take it out. If there's a fight scene that you planned for 5 weeks and this guy comes out and he starts, you know, trying to punch the guy before he gets in his car and they have a big fight, but it's not really integral to the story, but it took you 5 weeks and 6 weeks of planning and 5 weeks of doing this and that and 3 weeks of shooting and 10 weeks of editing. It doesn't matter. If it's not working in the film, take it out. Don't be attached to it, to something that doesn't work. You might have loved it. You might love the scene. You might love the joke. You might love whatever it is, but if it's not working, take it out.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Just at the end of the day, you want it to be sell, and at the end of the day, from my experience, what you want is something tight. You know exactly what you want, you know exactly what's going to sell, and you know exactly what your vision is for the idea.
Yeah.
You know your target market, and you know how to get it done in a timely manner. You've got your previs, your schedule, and then your post, and you make it happen. And sometimes it fails, but like most of the time, it should succeed if you do that right. But I totally agree. Like, you know, you can spend a lot of time on a scene, but if it's not working, you don't want to just keep blowing it. It's just like a dead limb's got to go. It's just
Exactly,
like, well,
yeah.
that sucks, but
Another
better than
thing-
no entire thing going. So
Another thing that I see being a huge issue is some directors will take it personally if the person doesn't like it in the test screening or says this or says that. Remember that it is not about you. That person is not thinking about you when they are reviewing the film. They're thinking, did I like this movie? So when checking your ego, it also is about that. Like, don't take it personally. Like, oh, this is brilliant because I worked on this. They don't
that's
care.
why my suggestion is always make work that's personal, but not too personal. So like care about your work, care about doing a good job, but don't make it personal. Don't make your baby, your best idea, like that you're super attached to, because it's just going to be heartbreaking. Don't do that to yourself. Again, just make something that you really care about, are really passionate about, and then see what happens and do your best. And that way it actually will most likely will sell more than like your precious like baby idea, because but for your first one anyway, because once you've like had a few successes, then you can know for sure how to make your baby idea and you can bend it so that it works. But that's my thing, because otherwise if you're too attached, you're not going to make what's it called logical decisions. If you have too much emotional, like, you know how it is, if you're seeing through the glasses of love, you can't make fucking sorry, swear. You can't make proper decisions. It's the same thing. If you're too attached, you're not going to make what's best for the film. So you have to be able to have that level of like being able to keep it at, you know, arm's distance, look at it from like an objective standpoint and not take anything personally, so you can make the best decisions for the best outcome while getting your vision and keeping the art alive. Because those are the points are important. If you don't sell your film, you're not making more. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you want to make sure that just because you like it, that doesn't mean that everyone else will. And so you gotta, if you are doing a test screening and there's something you really like and nobody else likes it, just, you know, don't keep it in just because you like it. If you find another test screening audience that likes it, then you might want to rework who your target audience is. But that's, if it's pretty unanimous across the board, you probably want to just take it out, because it's very likely that whatever you liked, you're just too attached. Like Priscilla, like Sarah was saying, you're just too attached to it. You're looking at it through the eyes of, we spent a long time on this. We worked really hard. Why don't people like this? Because I like it and we worked really hard on it. That doesn't mean that it's going to do what you thought it was going to do when you put it in your film in the first place.
No, I definitely agree with that. But it's pretty easy to do once you have some experience. It's hard to do like on your first like little few things. So don't worry about that. Just get through it. It gets easier to like be like, we're keeping this, we're not keeping this. Because if you're doing work all the time and that's what you do, it becomes actually, it's just like any other thing. It becomes easier to make those decisions and not be attached. So if you are upset, just allow yourself to be upset and then go through the motions, and the next time it won't be upsetting. And then also, yeah, sometimes also moving things around. Oh, this doesn't work coming from this character, but it might work coming from this other type of character, and just being realistic if you want to sell it to the widest audience. Now, if you are like a big filmmaker and say you have like 10 films, and they're all big sales, and you want to do this experimental film, and you know it doesn't have a big audience, but you want to do it for a niche market anyway, you can do it because you can.
Yeah.
But you know it's not probably there for the big buck mini money maker. It might hit off, but it might not. And you're taking a risk because you want to do it, but you don't. At that point, you don't need the money. So you're like, whatever, I'm doing it anyway. And it's coming out of the funding.
Right. And that goes in with the hand in hand with, like, if you're doing a movie for the message, if you're doing it because it's a personal project and you're not really caring about making money on it, then you can do whatever you want. And you know, you might want to do a test screening just to see what people think, but not really care about listening to any of the feedback. But if you're doing a movie that you love and that you're trying to make sure that audiences love too, and you're trying to make it the best it can be, then you definitely want to see what that audience thinks. And that's why the test screening is there. And that's why you want to, if you're not going to listen to any of the feedback, you might as well not have a test screening at all, because if you're not going to take any of the feedback that everyone's saying and implement it and try to make your thing better, then there's no point in having that anyway, because the whole point is to get feedback.
Well, yeah, no, definitely take the feedback, add the feedback, and hire the right people to do the right stuff, right? So if I have a production and you're like trying to make something work and it doesn't work, just move things around so it works. That's my solution.
Yeah. Okay, so but with all of that said, you also want to know what to listen to and what to let go. Yeah. You will typically already be afraid that something might not be working. If you're working in the editing room, if you're working with an editor, you're the director or the producer, and you're in there and you're seeing the rough cut or the final cut or whatever cut it may be, if even one person points it out, that thing that you're afraid might not be working, it may be worth looking into. So that's unlike, just because one person says it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. But if you're already thinking something's not working, or like, oh, this scene, it's not really making much sense, or I don't know if this scene belongs, or I don't know if this is coming across the way I thought it would, and even one person points out that same thing, then you might just take a closer look at it, because it might be that they noticed the thing that you noticed and it might not be working with even if others didn't really mention it because they just forgot about it or didn't really think about adding that into their feedback.
Feeling whatever feeling. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I also think that, like, you know, if you're building something and, you know, this might not work, but then you could be like sit down and being like completely honest, but like this part of it works, this does not. And then that gives you a chance to either scrap the idea before you sink any time or money into it, or bend it around to make it actually work and be like, okay, this might not work, but this works. And, you know, being flexible. And then being like, okay, this would work for a sell, but it doesn't go with our brand, so we can't do that. So then, so why don't we try this? And there's a lot more into it than that, I'm sure. But like, I feel like that's kind of like the starting point of actually being able to bend it or like make it together. You have 3 ideas on the table. That's usually a good place to start and go, okay, we've got these 3 ideas. Let's see which one is going to be the best to kind of like go for the sell and make it happen and make it work.
Yeah, and other than that, if it's only a few or one person saying something and leaving certain feedback, follow your instincts and go with your gut. Because usually if it's just 1 or 2 people saying it, if your gut is saying the same thing, oh, they're right, you might want to try to change it if you can, or you might want to switch around the scene or do whatever. But if you're like, no, they just didn't understand this one part and you're following your instincts and going with your gut, then you can keep it. Like Sarah and Priscilla were saying, it is hard because you can be really too attached to your project, and sometimes you can look at it through those love goggles of liking it too much. But if you're actually looking at it from an objective standpoint, then follow your instincts, go with your gut, because you might know what's best for your film, even though that 1 or 2 people didn't understand it. As long as not everybody is saying it, it's not the majority or it's not unanimous feedback, then it might just be something that those audience members don't really like it. That maybe they don't even like sci-fi films and you're showing a sci-fi film. Well, just because they're leaving feedback that they don't like certain scenes that have more sci-fi elements in them, doesn't mean you should change it because your movie is sci-fi and you're just trying to market it to a different target audience.
True, and it depends who you're asking too. Now, if you're asking people that make films all the time, I would take their like opinion a little bit more seriously than I would with just an audience member.
You don't. You don't even want the people who know films a lot to be in the test screening because they are going to leave very different feedback than a general audience.
And
so
your target audience
with a private screening, you might do that where you have like filmmakers and people who know the stuff so they can point out anything technical or structurally that doesn't make sense. But with a test screening, you usually want general audience members because you're trying to figure out who your target audience is going to be and who's going to come see the film and like it, rather than just this person noticed that this very specific filmmaker thing that not really many people pay attention to is saying that, you know, there's something wrong with this scene because of the story structure or whatever. If it doesn't matter to the rest of the general audience, then you go with your guts or your instinct on it.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree with that. And getting feedback, and maybe you have 2 test audiences or whatever, and then they get the.
Holy crap, I just realized you have like a lot to go through still.
No, we just have pitching tips and advice after this.
Yeah, but it's like huge.
But I definitely recommend watching that video. It's letter A in the syllabus. It's from Pony Smasher. I believe he's the director of, what's that movie called? Dang it, can't think of it now.
Which movie?
I just had it in my head. It's a superhero movie. It's a comedy. It's with the guy with the.
Oh, you're talking about Shazam?
Shazam. There you go. Yeah, so I think it's the director of Shazam, if I remember correctly, but he kind of goes over the pros and cons of a test screening and why some people hate the idea of test screening, but while others are like totally for it. And says, you know, it's usually a good thing. It's usually a good idea to do. It's just sometimes if you're working in a big studio environment, some executives will hear that piece of feedback of, well, there's no penguins in it and I like penguins, and then be kind of scared and be like, should we add penguins? Because all they're looking at is trying to make money. So he said, you know, sometimes there's some stupid stuff that happens in test screenings with executives jumping the gun on feedback. But other times it's really necessary to be able to figure out who's going to watch your film and how to best sell it and market it. Sometimes there will be just a black screen with text explaining what's happening if there's no parts of the scene that are finished yet. So again, that's going to change the overall viewing experience, of course, because if it's just text that says there's a big battle and character blah 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 dies, or even if it's not something that serious, if it's just there's a big battle, there's Voldemort versus Harry Potter, they're shooting, they're having their battle with their wands, there's big lasers coming out of their wands at each other, but you're not actually showing that, it's going to be a very different experience for that individual audience, because they're seeing, again, the test screening of it. So depending on how early the phase is of the test screening, there might not be much footage or visual effects or stuff finished. And that can mean that the feedback might be very subjective, and it might be very like you need to look at the feedback that is about certain elements, like story elements, rather than it felt boring. If it felt boring and it's a visual effects movie and there's not much visual effects, or it was hideous and you have like really like pre-visuals for your CGI because you don't have the CGI completed, then you don't really want to take that stuff seriously, because of course it's not completed yet. And that's why you look for different feedback within the notes to find the feedback that actually you can apply during it. Of course, if you're an independent filmmaker, you're probably not going to have that many test screenings, and you're not going to have that much CGI and visual effects usually. So you won't really have to worry about that. But if you ever get to make a film with a big company, just know that they can start test screening really, really early on to try to make sure there's a market for this movie while you're in production, while you're in post-production, and you're just finishing a few scenes here and there. And they can do like a really, really, really rough cut of the version of the film and try to test screen it. So just be aware that, that can alter some of the feedback. And if you're with executives and stuff, they may try to take some of that feedback seriously. And so it's just something to keep in mind. That's what the guy was saying. Sometimes the movie will be screened with different endings, playing at the same time to gauge audience reactions in 2 screening rooms at once and see which ending works better. So there might be 2 test screenings in a movie theater or something, and they're right beside each other. They send group A into screening room 1 and group B into screening room 2. Screening room 1 has the alternate ending, and screening room B has the ending that they think works. And then they hear from the audience, what did you think of the ending? And then they can give their feedback, and they can see which ending was liked more, which ending was more well received. A lot of movies will do this, especially if they have multiple endings ready, or if they have some kind of ending that's very controversial or something that they're not really sure about. They'll make 2 or 3 different endings, and then they'll see which one's working best and decide which one to put in the film. And that's why sometimes you'll see on a director's cut of films, when you get it on DVD or something like that, there's a different ending. It's because that's the ending the director wanted, but the studio saw in the test screenings that a different ending was working better for the overall general audience. And so they used a different ending. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. You can also utilize it to see if you have different endings, if you have ideas for different things and you actually shot different scenes, you can implement them and see what's working better and what's not based on test screenings. With private screenings are more like test screenings and are shown to an invite-only audience. Private screenings can be for friends, family, etc., to get some initial feedback on a film like a test screening would. Except for this, you would have more people that are maybe in film, like Sarah was saying, so that you can get feedback on structure and get feedback on the arcs and technical stuff that general audiences wouldn't really know. Private screenings can also be to show the film internally to the cast and crew, or to the executives and investors or studios that are involved with this movie before releasing it to the public. Lastly, private screenings may be held to invite press and movie reviewers, industry insiders, and more to watch the film early and leave reviews before the film is released to the public. So basically a private screening can be in the stages before a film is released, or it can be one of the final stages that you show to movie reviewers right before you have your premiere to the general public. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add on test screening or private screening? All right, last thing we're talking about is pitching tips and advice. I'm not going to go too in depth because we already talked about some of this stuff, but just some general stuff that I found. This stuff comes from Producers Guild of America. It's letter B in the syllabus, and the video is Chris Moore gives advice on pitching film and TV ideas. If pitching to producers, if you're trying to pitch to a producer an idea that you have to get a producer to come on board to help produce the film, understand the stage that you are pitching at. Understand what stage of development you are in, how much work you have done for that actual project, whether it's just an idea in the top of your head or whether you've actually like written out an outline and done some other things to kind of flesh it out a bit. If all you have is the idea, that's a lot of work for a producer to take on to try and help you turn it into a movie. There's a lot of stages that have to happen to get it from A to B in that case. So think about what work you can do beforehand before you reach out and pitch to these producers, especially bigger producers that have more projects on their hands or more options. You want to give them less work, not because they're lazy, but just because they have a lot of work to do and they understand that this film idea that you have, it might completely change over the course of actually writing the script. It might completely change while in production, and it might completely change again in post-production. So this idea might not even be the same by the end. And they understand that, and they want to make sure that they want to make sure that the idea is fleshed out enough to where it's going to be kind of the same or similar enough to where it's going to be the original idea and not something completely different at the end. Some of them will latch on. You do have the chance of pitching to them and they latch on to the idea, like it so much that they want to help see you through to the end. But it is a lot more work for them to take on. So the less work that it sounds like they have to do, the more work that you've done means the less work for them, the more enticing it may be for them to join on, because you've already written the script or you've already written an outline and you've done the initial target audience research and you've done a bunch of stuff to try to figure out how much is this film worth, how long is this film, does the idea work for a film or a show or whatever it may be, and other things to make sure that it's actually fleshed out. It's hard to get a movie made and to bring an idea through its stages all the way to a movie, like a finished product. Keep that in mind. Even for large, well-known producers, it's still hard to get an idea made into a movie. There's so many stages it has to go through. Finance being a huge one, getting the finance, getting people interested, marketing. There's so many stages that has to happen for it to work and for it to actually be finalized. So the more you can do up front, if you're trying to get producers to help produce your film, the more work you can do in development before you go to them, the better chance you'll have of getting them to join. This next stuff comes from Indie Film Hustle. It's letter C. The video is How to Pitch Your Screenplay or Film Idea, IFH Film School Business Screenwriting. They recommend watching the energy of the room and bringing your cadence and speed to the level the room is at. I would say to an extent. If the people you're pitching to are all tired and bored, you don't want to match them and bring your energy down to a boring and tired level, but you want to actually try to be enthusiastic and bring them up to your level and get them excited. But if they are if they're slow speakers or if they're faster speakers, depending on where you're pitching at, if you pitch in New York, you'll probably have a lot faster speakers and louder speakers there than you might have in a southern state that doesn't have much filmmaking or whatever. You might have slower speakers that speak a little slower and speak a little lower. And so you kind of might want to match the way their speaking style to be a part of the room instead of something different. Somebody that, doesn't fit in with everyone else in that room. So that's why you bring yourself to their level, either louder and faster, or you bring it a little slower and a little lower. And that way you're speaking at their level. That said, you definitely don't want to imitate, mock, or try to mimic the way someone speaks, especially if it's like an accent. Just because everyone in the room might be British doesn't mean you should try to do a British accent. The main thing he was saying is just try to match their speed and their cadence, their level of speaking, how loud they speak and how fast they speak. So next up comes from Studio Binder. It's letter D in the syllabus. How to pitch a TV show idea, TV writing and development, episode 6. Be brief and to the point. There's nothing worse in a pitch than dragging on and giving more details than are needed. Be confident, be passionate, and speak as if it's already a deal. Don't be arrogant, don't be cocky, but be confident. And the way you speak is like, they're definitely going to want to buy this film, but you don't literally say that because that becomes arrogant. So just, but you want to be confident in your project and be passionate in it to show that it's worth something and that you think that they will think it's worth something too. They recommend, for a TV show, they recommend the structure of your pitch be the first, starting with the origin. Briefly about what inspired you to write this film or what gave you the idea. The human hook next, which is why should people care? Why do other people care about this thing that you had the idea for? Then character, who is this about? Where are they right now in their life? Their desires, what do they want right now? What is their biggest want and how are they going to try to get it? Obstacles, what's in the way? Is there somebody or something stopping them from getting what they want? Excuse me. Highlights. The next step is highlights. What are the memorable standout moments of the story? In a TV show, you should have several ideas for episodes. What's going to maybe continuously happen? Are they going to continuously try to be captured from these people are trying to escape? Are they going to try to is there like a memorable moment of one of their family members dying and it's a very moving scene? All the best highlights you want to kind of condense down and fit into a really quick mention of this is the kind of stuff that's going to happen in the show. This is why you should be excited and why people will be excited to come and see it, because there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. And so you show the highlights, the best parts, all in a little brief. Then the next is open road. Where can we expect this series to go? Main thing with TV shows, the difference between it and film is that a TV show needs to last. If it can last for seasons, if it can last for spin-offs and stuff like that, it's more enticing to executives than if all you have the idea for is one season, or if all you have the idea for is a pilot episode. They want to make sure it has legs, it can stand on its own, it can last long. So this idea, does it work for a TV show? Can it extend into multiple episodes? That's what the main difference is in pitching a TV show compared to a film. You want to make sure you give that outline. In the video, letter D in the syllabus is, who was it? Studio Binder. They do an example using Breaking Bad, illustrating their roadmap and how quickly you can implement all of those things. So I would definitely recommend watching that video, because the way they did it, they wrapped it up in about a minute, and it kind of went through all of the different things that they just said in a really interesting way that made you want to kind of see the show, because it sounded interesting, it sounded different. Also, if you do watch, though, you want to be aware that they are specifically talking about doing an elevator pitch. In a regular pitch meeting, you normally want to extend the details out a bit more than they do in this video. So if you watch the video, they're doing an elevator pitch. That's why they wrap it up in a minute. If they're actually at a pitch meeting, like in the picture, you want to make sure that you can be up there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes talking about the project and going into more details than what they did with Breaking Bad in an elevator pitch. You also want to be sure to be prepared and practice a lot. Know your story, know why your characters make certain choices, and more. You want to be really clear on what your story is to yourself. That way, if they ask any questions about the story, you already have the answers. Be ready and be prepared with your pitch. You want to practice it a lot. Practice it with yourself, practice it with others, record it, see how long it took you to explain certain things, see where you're messing up, see where you might be jumbling words or talking over yourself or having difficulties, and try to work through those so that you're well prepared and ready to go when in any moment. When you're practicing for elevator pitches, you're practicing for any moment you find somebody, any situation where you're like, oh my gosh, that's somebody who might be able to act in my thing, produce my thing, invest in my thing. You want to be able to have that idea ready to go and be able to pitch it on the spot in that moment. So you have to actually prepare it and practice a lot to get to that point where you're really comfortable with it and you know your pitch, even if you get interrupted. That's the other thing. You want to practice a lot so that you're ready for interruptions, because they usually, the professionals won't interrupt you because it breaks the flow. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And that doesn't mean that you're working with professionals always and that you're going to pitch to professionals every time you pitch. So I also want to be aware of that, because if you have somebody who doesn't usually invest in film and you're pitching to them, they may stop you and ask questions before you're done with your pitch, and you want to be able to answer and then pick back up on your pitch from where you left off without completely drawing a blank from then on, which I know I definitely would struggle with. The stuff comes from Film Courage. It's letter H in the syllabus. What do executives want to see in a television series pitch? Eric Bork. When pitching a film, you focus on the isolated experience of that story. When pitching a TV series, you want to focus on the series as a whole, not just the pilot episode. With TV, executives want to know, can this idea last? Can this idea keep going for multiple seasons or more? That's why with a show Bible, you typically show how episodes play out. You give a general idea of how most episodes will be. If it's like if it doesn't have a linear story, then you just kind of give an idea of what the episodes would be, what the structure would be. If it has a linear story, you have the episode outlines and you kind of show the season arcs and the series arcs and what's happening in the story as a whole. Even in a show that doesn't have a linear story, you can still show the character arcs and what these characters go through. Friends, for instance, obviously we saw the character arc of Ross and Rachel, and they get together and then they don't, and whatever else. That was a main draw of the show.
Rachel as an individual had her own character arc as a character as well.
All of them did
Yeah,
for
but I
some
feel
most
like
part.
she
But yeah,
had
Rachel
the
had a
most.
character arc of her own, of going from a spoiled brat to an independent female that's working in an industry that she likes. Taking her life into her own hands instead of marrying some guy because her parents want her to, because he has money. So even if your series doesn't really have an overall story, you still have those arcs, and that's what you want to mention when you are pitching. And with a show, you usually have your show Bible to help you out to do that. Episode outlines, season arcs, character arcs, and a series arc as a whole, if you know how the series ends. You present it because you never know exactly what's going to happen. Part of it is practice, and part of it is going to be improv in the moment. This next stuff comes from AmericanFilmMarket.com. It's letter L in the syllabus. They say there's 5 stages to a pitch meeting. Stage 1, build rapport and warm up the room. Stage 2, ask questions and actually listen. Stage 3, deliver prepared component of your pitch, the part that you've been practicing, the part that you've went over and over again in your head, and practice on people and whatever else. The part that you have prepared. Stage 4, deliver improvised component of your pitch. What does that mean? That means if they're asking questions that you didn't have prepared in your pitch, you can improvise and on the spot be ready with those answers. You only do that by knowing your story inside and out. Stage 5, ask for one thing only if necessary and leave on a good note. So if you need to ask them something, make sure it's only one thing. When will I hear from you guys, or whatever the question may be. Just make sure it's not an abundance of different questions of how this is going to work. Keep it to one thing that you desperately want to know or need to know, and then leave it on a good note. Thank you so much, blah, 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 and you can go. You also don't want to talk about who was attached, was considering being a part of this film, and etc. Because it's basically the same thing as giving a list of people who have passed on the project. Oh, well, Disney was looking into funding it, but they didn't. So why are you telling me this? You're saying that Disney passed on it, so why should we take it? So it's not really a good thing to give out stuff like that. Oh, Tom Cruise was thinking of being my main actor, but he didn't.
Unless you're currently in negotiations and you're trying to see which deal you can get better. Yeah, no, if they are.
But they said was considering.
Exactly.
So it's like past tense.
Yeah,
if they are considering, there's a definite difference.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is considering being the lead actor. Well, that's definitely a draw you want to bring up. However, Tom Cruise was considering, but he passed. Then you don't want to bring that up. Don't bring up who's passing on it. Don't bring up who could have been involved if they're not going to be. You also do not want to get down to business right away. You want to put in an effort to make small talk and get to know the decision maker first. I've heard that almost across the board now with pitching. You want to it makes the room more comfortable. It makes you more comfortable, and it makes everybody ready to go for your pitch instead of it just being like you walk in and immediately you go to your pitch. You want to make a little small talk, get to know them just a little bit, and feel the room out, and also just make everybody kind of more comfortable and less tense. And that's the best way to do it, is making small talk, maybe a joke or two if you can. If you're not good with jokes, don't try to make them. But just ease the room a bit, get a little bit more comfortable with the room and feel it out, and then you can begin your pitch. You also do not want to wing your pitch. Be prepared. Everybody says that. If you think you know your story, that's great. Most likely there's going to be a question that if you haven't actually prepared yourself, if you haven't done a script analysis, if you haven't actually looked into the reasoning of your character's choices, they're going to ask something and you're not going to know, and it's going to draw a blank and you're not going to be able to answer it. Don't just go in thinking you know your story. Actually be prepared. Actually do the work it takes to know your story. Don't just think you do. Because even if you wrote it, it doesn't mean you know it inside and out. There's a difference between script analysis and writing a script. You also want to lead with the genre. This is a action adventure. This is a horror. This is what kind of film is it? That is the best lead because it makes you immediately think of those types of movies, especially if you're talking to investors or distributors or whatever. They know the analytics of those movies pretty well already. So off the bat, they know, okay, it's a comedy. That's a little harder to make because the timing has to be right, and it's going to appeal to a more niche audience that likes that type of humor compared to, okay, it's an action movie. A lot of people like those, but on that budget, there's going to be different things they're thinking, of course, but that's why you want to lead with that. This is this film. This type of film is what this is. That way they immediately have it in mind of what kind of film this is going to be as you go on with the rest of your pitch. You also do not want to refer to more than 3 characters by name. If they need to be mentioned, if you have more than 3 characters that you're mentioning in your pitch itself, do so by how they relate to the characters. Instead of being like George and Jeffrey went to the blah, blah, blah. If you have 5 characters and 2 are named George and Jeffrey, you might say George and his roommate, or Lisa and her brother, instead of Lisa and Bobby and George and Mike and Jeffrey and Harry and Sally. They all went here and there. It's going to be too confusing, convoluted, and they're not going to be able to keep up. So you want to make sure you're only naming at max about 3 main characters, and the rest are in relation to those characters. George's nephew, George's neighbor, George's roommate, instead of naming those, even though they have names in the script. You also want to prepare answers for some common questions you may be asked. Think about what people might ask, what might be their initial questions about certain choices the character makes, or certain things about the film or budget or whatever, and already have answers prepared for those so that you have them in your mind, because you might be asked questions that you're not really thinking of, and the more questions you can think about to figure out in advance, the better, so that you're prepared and ready to go with the answer. You also do not want to argue the point. If you get feedback that you don't like, say, thanks, let me think about that. Or thanks, I'll take that into consideration. Not, well, that's because, and arguing why their feedback doesn't make sense or why their feedback is not good and doesn't work for your film. Instead, you just want to say thank you and keep it moving. Write down the names of the decision makers you meet. Whoever's in that room, they're going to be deciding on whether you get funding, whether you get distribution, whatever you're going to try to get, whether they're producing your film, whatever you're trying to do, whoever you're pitching it to, for whatever reason, they're going to be the decision makers on whether you get the thing you went in to pitch for or not, whether that be funding, a producer, distribution, whatever it may be. Write down their names so you can remember who they are. And so then if they're contacting you, you can remember all of their names. It'll just make you appear more professional, and you'll have a better relationship with them as well if you can remember their names, even if they don't remember yours. Also, adapt if you receive patterns of feedback. Find ways to improve your pitch and or your project. So if you're pitching, you're usually not going to get a yes on the first pitch that you do. You're usually going to be pitching it to multiple studios, multiple executives, multiple investors, and whoever else. And so you'll have multiple pitch meetings most of the time, and you want to see if there's any pattern of the feedback you're receiving from them. Like, hey buddy, you need to speed up your pitch, or you need to do this or that, or man, you kept looking away. It was hard to pay attention to what you were saying because you weren't looking at us. Whatever or just it might be about the project itself. This sounds really expensive. And if you know that it's not expensive, that you can do it cheaply, you might want to add that into your pitch so that you can illustrate that to them in your pitch for the next pitch meeting you have with different people. So as you're going along pitching to multiple people, multiple pitch meetings, you just want to try to improve your pitch or your project if necessary as you go, if especially you keep receiving the same feedback. You need to speed up. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, but you don't think you need to speed up. You go to the next one, they say the same thing. Hey, you need to speed it up. Then yeah, you probably need to speed it up. So actually speed it up somehow. Cut out something, speak a little less about certain things, have a little less details, whatever it may be, speed it up because that's the feedback that you keep receiving. So yeah, keep all that in mind and be aware and ready to adapt it as you go, because you usually aren't going to have just one meeting where you have a pitch. You're usually going to have multiple. This last stuff comes from the Script Lab, letter M in the syllabus, thescriptlab.com. Know who you're pitching to. Always do your research. Make sure you're not just going into a room full of people that you think they're investors, so they'll invest in my film. Look them up. Make sure that they're going to invest in your kind of film, your kind of budget. All of that stuff we've talked about several times. Everybody says the same thing. Always do your research and make sure you know who it is that you're pitching to. What kind of films do they invest in or distribute or whatever it may be. Make sure you know that going in. You also want to read the room while you're pitching. If they're not paying attention, you might want to try maybe raising your voice a little or embellishing a bit more. Switch tactics, cut out some of the details. Do something to try to gain their attention again so that they are back on and zoned in with you. Look at them more, maybe. There could be the multiple tactics you could do, which can't really be described unless you're in the actual room with them. But just be aware of what's happening in the actual room and be ready to try switching it up on the spot. It's hard to do. And that's especially why you want to know your pitch in the back of your head. You want to practice it so much that you can pick it back up from where you left off, even if you switch what you're talking about for 2 minutes. You want to be like, okay, yeah, and blah, blah, back. Instead of being like, oh no, I lost my whole pitch because now I either have to start over or I'm just not going to know what part of my pitch I'm supposed to be at. So that's why practice is so important, because there might be pitch meetings where the people are looking over at the clock, or they're looking at their watch, or they're not even looking at you. They're just paying attention to something else. And to try to get their attention, you don't want to like yell at them, of course, but you want to raise your voice a little, or make yourself seem more interesting, or make the story seem more interesting somehow or some way.
And then bam.
To try to get their attention back on you.
And suddenly use those.
Yeah, somebody said they did once. It was, I don't remember which video this is in, but it was one of the comments. They said they were pitching and the person was they dozed off for a little bit. And so then they got a little louder.
I don't want that. Oh,
They got a little louder and they were like, and that's why this thing. And they made it seem like something really cool just happened that they missed. So when they woke up, they thought they missed something really exciting.
that could backfire because
Oh, it would
then
backfire. Like they didn't care at that point. Obviously, if somebody's falling asleep, you're probably not going to get the whatever you're going in for the pitch for, but you still want to keep
Probably
it professional, and you still want to make sure that you say thank you and whatever else. It may feel like a waste of time, and sometimes it kind of is, depending on how the room is, how they were. Some people are complete jackasses, and you just gotta take it and keep going because you're trying to get whatever you're trying to get from that pitch. So you go to the next people, and hopefully they're cooler, they're nicer, they're kinder, they don't fall asleep, whatever.
Yeah, but
Yeah, you always
sometimes
wanna
it's
leave it
not
open
like they're
to
falling
do.
asleep because you're just not good at pitching, bro.
Yeah, and also the note today.
That could also be a possibility. If you are not good at pitching, then they are falling asleep to it. It could also be they had 3 hours of sleep. It could be something personal in
Yeah, it
their
could be
lives that
that
made them
too,
fall
yeah.
asleep. So there's also that.
All
But
I
it
know
is something to
that-
keep in mind, especially because if multiple people are doing that, it
Yeah.
might mean that you're boring and you need to.
And all I know is that if it were me and I was hearing a pitch and the guy did pull that stat with like, and then this happened. And I was like, huh? And then I continued hearing the rest of the pitch, or I later looked up what the pitch was. And it wasn't anything that interesting. I'd have been annoyed.
You wouldn't look it up. You're hearing pitches all the time. If you fall asleep to it, you're probably not.
I
But the
know.
thing is, don't get mad. Don't get unprofessional to it. Just keep it moving. Sarah's always saying this. Just like try to do your best. And if they're being jerks, then just don't make a big fuss of it. Just kind of keep it professional and the way you can, and then go to the next one. Because if you lash out, if you get really mad, if you start arguing, pitch circles, people who invest in films, people who distribute, there is a circle that they talk to with other people who do the same thing. And you don't want to be the person that screams at people for not paying attention, or that
Oh, for
curses
sure.
people out, or whatever it may be.
And also like do things that relatively level too. So like pitch to who you think you're gonna pitch to, and also like leave a good impression, because like just because someone says no today doesn't necessarily mean you won't see them again. As a-
Exactly. Yeah. You
You
might
might
pitch to
not,
them
but
next year with a
you just
new
don't know.
feature film idea, or you might have
Yeah,
a new
or,
project
like-
3 years from now.
Or like you might get halfway through, or like they might decide to jump in and invest something after they see you got this other lead actor to join in, and they're like, oh, you know what? If you've got this person on the film, now I've changed my mind and I'll
Right.
invest in it. So you just don't know, right? So
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So you want to keep it professional the whole time through, no matter what. Even if it feels like a waste of time in those instances, you still want to keep it professional as best you can. Last thing is, you don't want to over explain or drag on with details that don't matter to the main story or the essence of the script. You only have so many minutes to explain your idea, to explain your pitch, your movie, your story. And you don't want to drag it out with details that don't really matter to the main what is it mainly about? What is the main message here? And what is the main character, the main story? No matter how many subplots you have, no matter how many messages are in your film, stick to the main stuff when pitching, because it'll be more streamlined and easy to keep up with for everyone who's listening. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about pitching tips and advice?
I don't have anything at the
When
moment.
you're
I was
sick.
saying to
There
just
you go.
do
Well,
it.
sometimes you might have to if you're sick.
Yeah,
Like,
okay, don't try to sneeze on them.
Try not to see one.
Yeah,
practice it like with a smaller pitch, and then like build up. So like maybe like get a few people, practice the pitch, get feedback, and then go in. And then once you've done a few pitches, you'll know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely gets easier as you go, and the more you've done it. The first time you pitch, the first time you go into one of those meetings, the pitch room, pitch meetings, it'll obviously be scarier because you've never done it before and it's a new environment. But the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and the more you kind of see the structure of it and the way it works, and the more comfortable you'll get with it, whether you've seen these people before or not. And especially if you are going back to the same group of people a few years later with another idea, another movie, or something like that. But yeah, so that was that for tonight. For Thursday, we will be talking about the main thing with marketing. Whether you're a big film or a small film, your main thing is figuring out your target audience. And if you're a company that's not with films, it's the same thing. You want to figure out who your target demographic is, your target market. Who are you trying to sell this product to? Us as filmmakers are trying to sell our film. Who are we trying to sell this film to? That is the most important question and the most important thing to figure out. Media advisories, we'll figure out what that is. Script coverage, what that means. Newsletter or email list, we've already talked a little bit about that, but we'll go into a little more detail as well on Thursday. Does anybody have anything to add or anything to say before we say goodnight?
I'm sorry for all the coughing in between the conversations.
I was coughing on Thursday. I think we're.
You better soon.
Oh, I think I am. I'm starting to get all my mucus out and all that crap. So
Ew.
Do the tea.
that's how you know it's getting better, right? When you just start getting
Right.
everything out.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Good
All
night.
right. All right. Good night.
Have a
You
good
guys
night.
on Thursday, kick ass.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the feedback and everything. Or thanks for the
I love these groups. I really appreciate it. Everyone's input.
Contribution, I don't know. I'm tired, man.
Yeah.
contribution.
It's really awesome having these discussions and like actually doing it, and then like you learn the stuff, and then you actually do it. It makes more sense.
Yeah,
Like,
and
it
it
already
makes you
makes
feel more
sense.
comfortable for doing those types of situations too, I think.
Yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah.
Because I have a better idea of what I'm getting myself into.
Go
Exactly.
get me sheets now.
All right, guys. Have a good one. See you on
Later.
Thursday.
Good night. You
Good
too.
night.
All right.